Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. As Kanoris recited the spell, the gates of the cages opened. Immediately, pungent stench of blood filled the air. Hideous demons and ferocious magical beasts rushed out from the cages like tidewater. There were growls, shrills, footsteps, and many other sounds overlapping. The sight of the mess gave Lin Li goosebumps on his scalp. Alright, let's get ready to leave this place. Lin Li was not joking. They were in the Abyss Arena, a place used to get rid of any of the Abyss Lord's enemies. There were innumerable minion demons, and demons locked in every cage were at least level 18 or level 19. Despite being close to the legendary realm, Lin Li could not help but get anxious when the 100 of cages were unlocked at the same time. Furthermore, since that was supposed to be a gift for the Lord of Souls, why should he help the Lord receive it? The moment Kanoris unlocked the cages, Lin Li cast a hastening spell on himself and rubbed the summoning lamp to call back the Lord of Nightmares from Steven's dreamland. Afterward, Lin Li grabbed Hutton, as well as Kanoris that was on the verge of escaping, and dragged them into the only passageway in the Abyss Arena. "Oh yes, where is Steven?" Hutton asked as he panted heavily. Underlying his tone was a lingering fear. Actually, Hutton should have known that President Felix would never forgive Steven so easily, especially for his undesirable actions. President Felix was a man that could slaughter the entire Sire bandits with a strength of more than 300 men. How would President Felix deal with a traitor like him? However, it might not cost Steven his life. After all, Steven had the strong backing of the Dark Blade, as well as the support from the 3 legendary powerhouses. Even the Manhwa family would never dare to provoke them, especially after their latest battle. Hutton could also sense the obvious fear and dread from his mentor upon mentioning the 3 legendary figures. To be honest, Hutton could tell that the abilities of President Felix would definitely be beyond what he could imagine. Sometimes, Hutton even thought that the young mage had the ability to outsmart those legendary figures who had been respected for more than a few decades. That was just Hutton's pure intuition, one that bloomed out of his experience after encountering a multitude of shocking interactions. Yet, personal strength was still the most important. In the entire Breezy Plains, there was only a handful of people who had the ability to use their personal strength to get what they wanted. These people were Ashen Warlock, Shadow Moonsword Sage, as well as the mage from the Tower of Darkness, just to name a few. They were powerful existences who had strength beyond the imagination of humans in the Breezy Plains. Before one could get to their level, all was still dependent on the degree of influence one had. Felix's Guild of Magic had just been built in the Breezy Plains not long ago. Without any foundation, it was like an infant who was still trying to learn to walk slowly. Any impulsive or foolish man would have known that offending the Dark Blade was not a wise decision on their part, and that it would be as good as digging their graves. If Steven were to lose his life here, awaiting the Guild of Magic would be the Dark Blade's rage of fury. Then, this force that lacked foundation would be uprooted by the Dark Blade. President Felix is a clever man, he should have thought of this. Steven still needs to wait for an old acquaintance. He won't be continuing this journey with us, Lin Li replied as he glanced at the center of the Abyss Arena. Steven had just woken up from his dreams. He was rubbing his groggy eyes and looking at his surroundings with trepidation and confusion. It should be enough. Lin Li calculated the time. After being sure that those cages had been unlocked, he flung the soul fragment onto the ground and gave it a hard step. A crisp sound could be heard, and a strange and unexplainable force was released. "Let's go," Lin Li urged as he pulled the confused Hutton into the passageway. He never looked back. Being built by the ancient deities, the Abyss Arena itself had a magical force. The moment both men entered the narrow passageway, the entrance behind them was blocked by red glow. This red glow was not a glaring one. It looked like a thin sheet, but acted as a barrier between the passageway and the Abyss Arena, which became like 2 separate worlds. Numerous magical beasts and demons that dashed towards the 2 humans that trespassed the arena could not get past the red shield no matter how hard they tried. President Felix, isn't this too harsh? Hutton asked Lin Li uneasily. Frankly speaking, Hutton really felt that President Felix had just made a reckless decision. Stephen was the heir of the Dark Blade, after all. If they were to leave Stephen here, Hutton would turn into President Felix's accomplice. Then, the Dark Blade would be going after both the Manhwa family and the Guild of Magic. It wouldn't matter for the Manhwa family. Since they had been enemies for more than a century, another bit of hatred wouldn't be any different. Chill, Stephen won't die, Lin Li comforted Hutton. He knew what the latter wanted to say, but unfortunately, he was really busy now. Since he entered the passageway, Kanoris never stopped nagging. This almighty soul traitor continued to disturb Lin Li via mental communication. Freak, how did you know that? Know that you could open those cages? Kanoris's voice trembled as he said, that's right. That's one of my greatest secrets, that even Osric was oblivious to. How? How would you know it? This almighty soul traitor could not help but feel really petrified. He couldn't do anything about it. Due to his current disadvantage of not having a body, his greatest fear was to be seen through by people. After he got his powers taken away by Osric, knowledge was the only asset he was left with, the secrets he'd accumulated over countless years. If he failed to protect those precious pieces of information, this former demon lord would really turn into a slave to humans. I say, Kanoris, as an almighty soul traitor, do you not know what a fair trade is? You have your secrets, I have my secrets. Imagine how many secrets you have kept from me ever since we met at the Eternal Furnace? Do you really think that I'm oblivious to everything? Lin Li asked. Although he did not sound angry, his words shot out unapologetically. After taking a pause, he continued, alright, Kanoris, let's strike a deal. If you want to know why, use your own secrets to trade with mine. What? What do you want from me? Your background. Oh yes, stop patronizing me with the title Almighty Soul Traitor. A fool would have known the greater demons that existed before the Dark Age had many shadows of themselves. Do you all have a fetish for role-playing? You. What did you know? Kanoris asked in a voice that trembled harder than before. He stopped maintaining his fetish for role-playing. It is no great secret that greater demons reincarnated countless times since the Dark Age. Most who are above the Lord level would have known that. Yet, how did this information get to a human? Actually, Kanoris, I just want to know which of the 99 beings you are. Lin Li's words turned the conversation into a daunting silence. If Lin Li's words only made Kanoris worry earlier on, his words now really made the almighty soul traitor fearful. The 99 beings Lin Li was referring to had to be the 99 ancient deities. You have to be curious where I got this information, right? Lin Li asked, smilingly. He did not care what was on Kanoris's mind. Am I right, almighty soul traitor? How do you know that? Kanoris had lost count of how many times he asked Lin Li this question. I guessed it, F***CKU, that was the first vulgarity the polite Kanoris hurled at anyone so far. The day had been filled with developments beyond his imagination. The powerful greater demon had never lost his composure like this before. Scolding me will not work, Lin Li rubbed his nose blatantly. He was now a little awkward. Actually, it is not difficult to guess that you are an ancient deity. Only their souls could stay in the eternal furnace for such a long period of time. Do not lie that your soul was protected by any seal. Do not forget that it is a WYRM's magical crystal that was etched on the furnace. It was a crystal of at least level 24. The fire element within it could even deter legendary powerhouses, what more a soul sealed within. Just because of this? Kanoris cried. He was about to go mad. The unreasonable fact that gave away the ancient deity's past made him frustrated. He could not defend himself at all. After all, he was the one who'd used the spell to open the cages in the Abyss Arena. The Abyss Arena was created by the ancient deities. Only the ancient deities had the knowledge of the laws and forces of the Abyss Arena. Even if the Lord of Darkness had reincarnated, he would not have been able to use his spells to unlock the cages. While people unaware of it would not have noticed the ability Kanoris had, people like Lin Li would be able to easily guess that Kanoris had to be an ancient deity. That darn cycle was like how a chicken could hatch from an egg and how an egg could hatch into a chicken. Because he was an ancient deity, he should be able to unlock the cages. Because he could unlock the cages, he should be an ancient deity. God damn it. Of course, there were other factors as well. But I'm keeping those secrets to myself, Lin Li said arrogantly. He had always felt inferior to Kanoris ever since he met him at the Eternal Furnace. On the surface, he had the ability to trap Kanoris in the Ring of Endless Storm, and acquire some information of the Dark Age from him, but Lin Li always felt that the self-proclaimed soul trader had always been dominating a lot of interactions between them. He always felt like a marionette in the unruly hands of Kanoris. Lin Li had finally gotten the upper hand in this relationship. Lin Li only discovered the true identity of Kanoris just now. However, the WYRM crystal in the Eternal Furnace was just one of the factors that supported his hypothesis. Lin Li had used that information to patronize Kanoris. In fact, there were many reasons that could contribute to the preservation of one's soul. There was no evidence that could prove Kanoris was a real ancient deity. The key determinant of Kanoris's identity was the spell he recited when they were at the river. To normal people, the spell that Kanoris recited was just a random ancient and obscure recitation. Even Anduin, who had good understanding of the Dark Age, wouldn't have understood the language Kanoris was reciting in. In fact, Lin Li was clueless as well. However, that was not the main point. Lin Li could make guesses. To a freaky versatile crafting master like Lin Li, too much information could be garnered through a recitation that sounded ancient and obscure. Being well-versed in the demon language, it was easy for Lin Li to recognize the 17 types of demon language in the Endless Abyss. They were just like human dialects that were unique in their own ways and cultural dimension. Many a time, they sounded very different from one another, yet if one were to study them closely, he would be able to find a strand of similarity that existed across those languages. Kanoris' recitation was what allowed Lin Li to make such a bold guess. However, since it was spoken by a demon, and had the features of the demon language, the fact that it was completely different from the other 17 languages helped to narrow the boundaries by a lot. Despite it, Lin Li was not entirely certain that Kanoris was a legendary ancient demon that had powers comparable to the Titans and WYRMS, a terrifying existence that once lived in the prehistoric times yet was not known to many. That was the reason for the rest of the story. It was supposed to be a test when Lin Li let Kanoris unlock the cages for him. In that pressing situation, no one, not even an ancient deity, would have wasted the time to disguise himself. To Kanoris, that was just revealing a bit of his secret. As an ancient demon, he had many other similar secrets. So what if he let a human know a few pieces of such information? In fact, he had been considering finding a suitable time to reveal his true identity to Lin Li. Kanoris never would have dreamt that all it took to give away his identity was one recitation. Alright, after a long period of silence, Kanoris said, I admit that I have hidden some information from you. You're right, I was indeed one of the 99 ancient deities many years ago. However, those are all bygones. I am now just a pathetic soul that had been sealed within a hammer. Then, almighty soul trader, is it time to be honest with me about some things? What do you want to know? Everything. Lin Li's exclaimed in an absolute tone. However, before then, I really want to know which of the 99 deities you were. Countless years ago, I was once the lord of the 90th level of Abyss who governed the laws of conspiracy and deceit. My real name was stripped the moment my soul was shattered into innumerable fragments. Unless I retrieve the fragments, I won't be able to use that name myself. I see. Lin Li nodded his head, and did not insist further. The names of ancient deities embodied massive powers. Just like the Titan and the ancient dragon language, a single syllable would suffice in creating a destructive force. If there had been enough power to shatter a soul of an ancient deity like Kanoris, who could imagine the impact of that invincible name? Oh yes, Kanoris. I don't understand one thing. Since you were once an ancient deity, how did you get caught by Osric? I presume it shouldn't have been that hard to deal with him when he was just a beginner at level 25? Humph, that darn Osric. The mention of Osric caused Kenora's tone to carry an obvious note of hatred. I was still searching for my soul fragments before I was caught by Osric. In fact, I've recovered 1/3 of them. If given more time, I would have been able to reacquire the law of conspiracy. By that time, 10 Osrics would be nothing to me. So impressive? Humph, do you think ancient demons are called ancient deities for no reason? The ancient demons in the prehistoric age were as good as real divinities. Osric would never have been able to challenge the force of the divine, no matter how powerful he was. Even though I had only recovered 1/3 of my powers, it made me no easy target for Osric and his magic legion. Unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Unfortunately, Osric had an artifact that was left behind by the immortal king. Artifact? Lin Li was stunned. But he regained composure very quickly. Artifacts were nothing to him. The artifacts in Anril were just like the 7 artifacts of Felon Kingdom, merely magical equipment that was more powerful. When he was at Alana Guild of Magic, Lin Li had seen an artifact called the Thunderlord Staff. It was presented to the Guild of Magic 200 years ago by the King of Felon. This Thunderlord Staff became one of the 7 artifacts of Felon, and was said to have belonged to a high elf sanctuary master during the Dark Age. The weapon of the sanctuary master was incredibly powerful. Lin Li could tell that the craftsmanship of the Thunderlord Staff would be at least at Guru level. To ordinary men, the Guru realm was something beyond imagination. To a versatile crafting master like Lin Li, however, the realm was actually nothing to be proud of. Not to exaggerate, as long as he had enough materials, Lin Li could create as many similar artifacts as he wanted. Kenoris had once been an ancient deity. Even though his soul had been shattered, causing him to lose 2/3 of his powers, the power he was left with was still not what an artifact could measure up to trap him. To be honest, Kenoris, if what you said was true, I really cannot believe a so-called artifact would have the ability to harm you when you have recovered 1/3 of your energy level. No. The artifact I was referring to was a real artifact. Kenoris paused. It was the first time his voice carried so much fear. It was created by the divine. Lin Li could not help but draw in a mouth of cold breath. A weapon created by the divine. Isn't it like the Stars of Fury? It was this artifact that enabled Osric to capture me when we were at the 20th level of the Abyss. I see, Lin Li nodded his head. Just when he was about to ask another question, Kenoris suddenly trembled on his back. The Lord of Souls is here. Huh? Lin Li was stunned. His gaze was filled with surprise and curiosity. He turned to look at the thin red film. Through it, Lin Li saw a greater demon that appeared out of nowhere. It had a sharp horn, hideous face, and a body covered in countless purple scales. The sight of it gave him goosebumps. Around its 2 insidious paws were purple electric arcs that revolved around its sharp claws. What could it be other than the legendary Spirit Walker? It had been said that the purple arcs that revolved around their claws were the source of energy for the Spirit Walkers. The innate spell of the Spirit Walkers was the Soul Storm. It was a spell that resembled a heavy storm that could drive anyone to lunacy. Any living creature stuck in the Soul Storm would have their soul engulfed and literally turn into walking corpses. Furthermore, the souls that were swallowed by the Spirit Walker would be enslaved eternally. Every soul that the Spirit Walkers engulfed would also increase their powers. There were also people who said that once the Spirit Walker had taken enough souls, it would be able to attain the genuine law of souls, and become a semi-divine and semi-demon monster. Of course, that was just an exaggeration. Mephistos from Tharlan was the only Spirit Walker that got to the legendary realm over the countless years. In fact, he became the Lord of Tharlan when he just reached level 20 many years ago. If not for the sudden descent of the shadow of the Dragon of Destruction, there was a high chance for Mephistos to rule over the Abyss of Tharlan until today. Being located at the 27th level of the Abyss, it would only be normal for the place to be filled with greater demons above level 20. There was a possibility for level 21 or level 22 to exist as well. The fact that Mephistos could rule over the abyss of Tharlan at just level 20 was a testimony to the power of spirit walkers. However, it would be impossible for Mephistos to reach the sanctuary realm. The evolution of a spirit walker was dependent on the type of souls it engulfed. Unless a spirit walker swallowed a soul of a level 27 or level 28 creature in the sanctuary realm, it would never attain the same realm. What could a level 27 or level 28 creature do? That was an invincible, indomitable existence that could crush Mephistos with a finger. As for other spirit walkers, there would not be a place for them. Unfortunately, Mephistos appeared at a very untimely moment, emerging from the void in the middle of the abyss arena, and the countless demons and magical beasts dashed towards him like tide water. Frack this! Mephistos was stunned by the encounter. "Darn you, human! How dare you deceive the Lord of Souls," growled Mephistos. His voice made the space tremble. What? What is happening?" Hutton gasped as he stared blankly at the scene before him. "To put it simply, I've covered the eyes of the Lord of Souls with some small things," Lin Li smiled as he gave an indirect reply. The existence of the Lord of Nightmares was a great secret Lin Li kept to himself. Although the Lord of Nightmares sealed in the oil lamp was not the powerful lord of the 18th level of the Abyss, and its power had fallen to around level 19, its ability to alter dreams was a very important weapon to Lin Li. If it was put into good use, it would be more terrible than the humorous WYRM. Lin Li would naturally not want to reveal such a secret to Hutton. "Is that the work of the Lord of Nightmares?" asked Canoris. He had seen through the trick Lin Li did. "You're right. Unfortunately, the two rainbow manticore kings that shared the same soul had died. Otherwise, we really could have given Mephistos a grand surprise. As for now, I think that we should take the chance to escape this monstrous place before Mephistos shrugs off those prisoners." "Hope the prisoners can help us buy time," Lin Li agreed with Canoris. Mephistos was a spirit walker in the legendary realm, after all. This former Lord of Tharlan had an ability to cast the most powerful soul storm. It would be too optimistic if one wished to use a bunch of level 18 or level 19 demons and magical beasts against it. However, buying a bit more time would suffice. His main goal of stepping into the abyss of Tharlan was not to conduct any massacre. He would be getting a huge windfall just by finding the Throne of Darkness and getting the 3 relics left behind by Juresco. How would he have the mood to tussle with Mephistos? "Alright, let's leave this place," Lin Li said, and proceeded to recite the Transcend spell. According to Canoris, they would need around 10 minutes to get through the passageway. Since they would be encountering many vengeful spirits, he would need to maintain the Transcend spell all the way. If he happened to break the spell, they would be drowned by the vengeful spirits immediately. The Transcend spell was a level 18 spell that most archmages struggled to cast, and to sustain it for 10 minutes would be almost impossible. Only a freak like Lin Li, who had the experience of sustaining the maximum mana output for a long time during the magic trial, would have the confidence to undertake such an impossible mission. Even so, Lin Li dared not to be complacent. He did not forget to let Hutton wear the robe of light before he started the recitation. That was a master-level magical equipment. Although it might not be totally resistant to the attack from the vengeful spirits, it would definitely be useful to alleviate any crises. After all preparations, Lin Li started his recitation of the Transcend spell. The 2 young mages and 1 ancient deity began to walk towards the end of the passageway. Canoris was right. It was definitely the greatest number of vengeful spirits Lin Li had seen in his entire life. His first encounter with the vengeful spirits in the Blackstone Mountains that were summoned by Sendros with the 1,000 Souls spell would never have been able to rival this. The entire passageway was filled with vengeful spirits. Lin Li could see countless of them vanishing with the Transcend spell for every step he took forward. The resentment and thirst for vengeance released by the spirits as they were transcended rushed towards both men like a crazy tidal wave. The resentful scenes produced by them were filled with blood and gore, which continued to challenge the mental limits for both men. The varied sorrowful wails rang in their ears. It was as though they had walked into the 10 courts of hell that only appeared in myths. If not for the protection of the Transcend spell, anyone would have become a lunatic due to those horrific scenes, no matter how resolute their minds were. Hun was considered a reputable man in the breezy plains. He was an archmage in his 20s and the eldest heir of the Manhwa family. Yet, when he walked through the passageway that was filled with numerous vengeful spirits, he could not help but turn pallid immediately. Huge beads of sweat trickled down his forehead, and his hand gripping his staff started to tremble uncontrollably out of fear and nervousness. Although he was a distance away from Hutton, Lin Li could hear the faint sound of his teeth chattering. If he did not have the transcend spell, even Lin Li would never be able to imagine the consequences of going ahead. The 10-minute-long travel felt like 10 years to both men. They were exhausted by the time they reached the end of the passageway. When they stopped to look at each other, they could see that their pallid faces were covered in cold sweat. Phew, Lin Li panted heavily. When he turned to look back, he couldn't help but distastefully exclaim, "I will never set foot into this darn place even if there needs to be a second time." "Same here," Hutton agreed as he wiped his sweat off with his sleeves, dramatically. The two of them rested against the cold stone wall. Only after half an hour did they muster enough strength to raise their exhausted bodies and push the pitch-black gate open. The gate creaked open, and glaring light made both men hold their breaths. At that instant, the entire passageway was lit up by the glow. The dazzling light forced Lin Li to shut his eyelids. He only opened his eyes again after adjusting to the change in his environment. After that, Lin Li saw a whole new world. "This looks like the real Palace of Darkness." The sky behind the door was full of glistening stars. It was an extremely vast and empty world. The emptiness extended beyond boundaries as though it would reach the end of the world. From Lin Li's position, he could only see a sky full of stars and a pathway that could turn anyone crazy. Oh my God, Lin Li swept his gaze past that pathway and could not help but swallow his saliva. There were countless corpses piled up in the void, which made it seem like a pathway leading towards the end. Those corpses belonged not only to demons and magical beasts, but also high elves and other creatures that Lin Li did not know. Lin Li could sense very clearly that each of the bodies had great powers despite the fact that thousands, millions, of years had passed since their death. However, the most horrid problem for Lin Li was the fact that there were plenty of treasures lying together with the corpses. There were gold ingots, gems, crystals, magical equipment, and magical metals. It was as though he had entered a huge treasury. The magnificent glow from the treasures was so glaring that made it difficult for him to open his eyes. If we were to bring them back, we would be able to buy the entire Alana, Lin Li mumbled nervously, and was really curious to know what other treasures had been hidden in that pathway. However, it would be impossible to do so. That spread of treasures that knew no boundary was not for anyone to measure its value. Even if Lin Li were to carry the treasures back to tabulate their worth, he would need to spend 3 to 5 years doing it. A strike. The infinite riches gave Lin Li excitement stronger than the fear given by the countless number of vengeful spirits. Lin Li stood still, and his mind was entirely occupied by those infinite magical crystals, gems, and gold ingots. Strictly speaking, Lin Li was not a poor man. As a man who was versatile in every type of craft, the jackpot of 1 million gold coins he had gotten in Gerosis had enabled him to spend all those riches on building his guild of magic without batting an eyelid. Lin Li was confident that his talents in pharmacy, forging, magical enchantment, and other life skills would provide the funds needed for the construction of his guild. Despite being a tough man with a very thick and inhumane nervous system, Lin Li was close to *ting his pants at the sight of all the fortunes. He couldn't help it. That was a terrifying amount of wealth. Lin Li could spot at least 1,000 magical crystals that were above level 15 from where he was standing. He even witnessed level 18 magical crystals that rarely appeared in the black market, strewn all over like big white cabbages here. Lin Li found nearly 10 legendary magical crystals as well. Each of them had the ability to make any mage go bankrupt. Not to mention other things like crystals, gems, and magical metals. When Lin Li was in the Endless World, he was a rich man who owned several private mineral veins. Yet, the sight of that pathway made him feel that his possessions were insignificant. he couldn't help it. There were just too many magical metals and accompanying gemstones, and each of them had undergone the necessary treatment and was ready to be used in forging and inlaying. Lin Li made a modest estimation and discovered that if he were to sell these treasures, he would be able to earn more riches than the worth of the entire Gilded Rose. If he were to process the treasures further, he would be able to multiply their value by 2 or 3 times, the magical weapons as well. Lin Li could tell that each of those magical weapons was definitely an authentic and high-quality object that had great magical ability. If one were to use them wisely, he would be able to revive the glory the High Elf's magic legion had gained. Damn it, I'm going to swallow all these riches even if I'm going to die of fullness. Lin Li swallowed his saliva resolutely, and prepared to open his ring of endless storm to contain all the treasures. However, before he could open the ring of endless storm, Lin Li suddenly spotted a black figure. He could vaguely see a black figure at the end of the path filled with corpses and treasures. There was a sense of evilness and darkness emitting from that black figure. To Lin Li, the powerful strength from the force was comparable to gloomy dark. Yet, gloomy dark never gave Lin Li such a huge pressure. After all, gloomy dark was just magical equipment. Although it was one of the strongest pieces of magical equipment in the world, the threat magical equipment could pose would always be determined by its user's ability. Freak, how could that be possible? Canoris exclaimed as he jumped down from Lin Li's back. The voice Lin Li received from the mental strength was riddled with astonishment. What is it? Lin Li asked uneasily. After all, Canoris was an ancient deity who had witnessed many kingdoms rise and fall. There shouldn't be anything in this world that could surprise him. However, the voice of this ancient deity sounded as though he was a girl who had just woken up from a hangover and realized she had lost her virginity. That's the Lord of Darkness. It can't be. Lin Li gasped in bewilderment. Despite being a bold man, he could not help but feel surprised upon hearing that. Lin Li had to put away his desire for those riches at once. He knew that the priority was to leave the darn place as quickly as possible. Yet, when Lin Li turned to look back, the black gate as well as the path behind it had already vanished without a trace. The world that was made up of stars and void seemed to be in another dimension. The road behind Lin Li was distorted after he set foot into the space. Damn it, trouble's huge now, Lin Li muttered. He could few buckets of cold sweat on himself. Even if Lin Li had experience in defeating 2 liches, and could appear bold in front of the Lord of Souls, Lin Li could not help but feel intimidated by the Lord of Darkness. That was the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. Having fought with Azardas when he was in the Endless World, Lin Li naturally knew better about the powers of the Dragon of Destruction. Being a dragon aspect, the evilness and darkness it governed were part of Anrel. It was a dreadful existence, even more so than any deity. After all, deities that descended upon Anrel would have their powers greatly diminished. However, it was not the same for the Dragon of Destruction. Its powers would only get stronger, and not a bit weaker. Not to mention the current Lin Li. It was pure luck and the possession of the Stars of Fury that allowed the previous Lin Li emerge victorious in the battle against Azardas. The Stars of Fury played a huge role in summoning hundreds of high elf spirits to aid him in the fight. If not, surviving the battle would have already been a great problem for the vulnerable super hunter, let alone winning it. The Lord of Darkness was the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. Even with 1/10 of Azarda's powers, it was enough to create great troubles for the current Lin Li. He couldn't help it. Not only had the current Lin Li yet to reach the legendary realm, he had also lost the invincible artifact, Stars of Fury. If he were to engage in a battle with the Lord, he would not be able to measure up to 1/10 of his own past self. However, the Black Gate had been shut now. The path back to where they came from had vanished. There wouldn't be anywhere for Lin Li to escape to. What should we do? Lin Li asked nervously as he stood rooted. He was at a loss of what to do. God damn it. Is that a ghost? That was Canoris, the former ancient deity who governed over conspiracy and deceit. He was rid of his usual composure. Didn't the Dragon of Destruction fall countless years ago? He only left behind two descendants that are far less powerful. As the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction, how could the Lord of Darkness exist after the Dragon of Destruction had fallen? Hey, Kanoris, Lin Li said as he watched the unmoving black figure in the distance. Could it be that the Dragon of Destruction has not fallen from the start? He asked, and swallowed his saliva uneasily. It can't be. Kanoris, retorted Lin Li without hesitation. I am the only person in this world who knows about the whereabouts of the Dragon of Destruction. Let me tell you a secret. Shoot, Lin Li nearly rolled his eyes in frustration. How did this bastard still have the mood to create suspense at such a crucial timing? Do you know where High Lord Osric got his powers from? Lin Li tried breathing deeply to calm himself down. I only know that if you are still not going to speak, I'm going to turn you into bait for the Lord of Darkness. Since the Lord of Darkness is the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction, he should be interested in the soul of an ancient deity. Wait. Let me tell you now. Kanoris grew anxious at Lin Li's threat. The reason why Osric was as powerful as Juresco and the Queen of the High Elves during the Dark Age was because he inherited magic from the Immortal King. No wonder, Lin Li was not surprised by Kanoris' secrets. He just felt enlightened. This might be the only explanation for why a normal noble like Osric could be the second most powerful High Elf. The extreme difference between the nobles and royals of the High Elves was a hard truth. The royals were endowed with the abilities of an archmage from birth. Their long lifespan made it highly probable for them to break into the legendary realm. Unlike the royalty, the nobles of the High Elves were born with the ability of magic shooters. Moreover, their innate talents and lifespan were lagging far behind the royals. Those with a better potential had a chance to go past level 15, while the rest might not even reach anywhere above level 15 even if they were given eternity to live. Before High Lord Osric appeared, there was no noble who had the ability to surpass the royals. This was also the reason why the royal family always had the greatest power in the kingdom. But, what has this got to do with the Dragon of Destruction? Didn't I tell you that it was Immortal King that contributed to the fall of the Dragon of Destruction? As Osric acquired the magic abilities from the Immortal King, he got to know many of his secrets as well. These secrets include the fall of the Dragon of Destruction. If you had the chance to enter Osric's mausoleum one day, you would be amazed to see how a pair of dragon eyes hangs in the center of the mausoleum. They act as the lighting of the mausoleum. You mean, Osric acquired the remains of the Dragon of Destruction? Lin Li gasped. Just a part of it. When the Immortal King killed Azardas, he used up most of the dragon's remains to build his 7 sky castles. The only things he left for Osric were the pair of dragon eyes and some scales. Unfortunately, the eyes had been left behind in Osric's mausoleum, and the scales had been used to create Osric's armors. If not, we might have been able to avoid the troubles coming our way. Wait, Lin Li interrupted Kanoris. Did you mean that we would be able to escape this place if we had the remains of the Dragon of Destruction? No. Not escape. Just when Lin Li was feeling a sense of disappointment, Kanoris continued talking. If I did not guess it wrongly, the current Lord of Darkness should no longer be the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. After all, it is a fact that the real Dragon of Destruction had fallen. No matter how powerful that reincarnation was, it would definitely not exist so many years after the Dragon of Destruction had fallen. Damn it, so what are you trying to say? I mean, although that fella in front looks hella scary, it is only a monster that is made up of the laws of darkness and evilness and a few soul fragments. It does not have its own consciousness. Although it can continue to exist in such a special dimension, everything about it would be instinctive. If we had the remains of the Dragon of Destruction, we would be able to take in this fella, instead of escaping. Sigh. It would be great if Osric had left the eyes of the Dragon of Destruction at the Eternal Furnace. The eyes of the Dragon of Destruction, Lin Li thought through Kanoris' words carefully. Damn it, where the F***ck can I find that? Cut the crap, I know it obviously, Kanoris' voice was riddled with the same frustration. However, this ancient deity did not expect that before he could complete his sentence, Lin Li had already reached into his ring of endless storm and fished out many things. Kanoris saw a pile of things before his eyes within a few minutes. There were many scales, glossy and firm skin, mountain of bones, incredibly sharp horns, as well as a bald skull. From the shape of the skull, one could easily tell that it was from a WYRM. This? Kanoris exclaimed in bewilderment. Ugh, I wouldn't be able to find the eyes of the Dragon of Destruction, Lin Li said as he rubbed his nose awkwardly. If I'd known how precious those things are, I would not have smashed them under my feet. But, Kanoris, quick, help me see if these things can replace the eyes. I presume that we wouldn't be able to do anything with the scales. What do you think of the skin? That was from its belly, the firmest and softest part of its body. Oh. There's this skull as well. Since it could contain the brain, it should be able to contain a reincarnation, right? While Lin Li rattled off his questions loquaciously, Kanoris remained silent. Frack you. Kanoris snapped after he stayed silent for close to a minute. What's your problem? Lin Li was stunned by Kanoris' remark. He raised one of the dragon horns and asked, are these useless as well? You. This time, Kanoris was really on the brink of madness. Even though he was an ancient deity that had lived through the prehistoric times, Kanoris could not help but feel breathless at this experience. The remains of the Dragon of Destruction were piled into a hill, before Kanoris. The unique aura of the Dragon of Destruction screamed authenticity to Kanoris. As an ancient deity, he had made several appearances in the battles between the Titans and Dragons when they contended for dominance over Anril. Having interacted dozens of times with the Dragon of Destruction, how could Kanoris not recognize its unique aura? However, this was what drove Kanoris mad. The fall of the Dragon of Destruction happened near the end of the prehistoric times. Its body had been used by the immortal king to construct the sky castles. The only remains today would be its eyes and some scales. But look. What are these things? There were countless scales scattered on the ground, a dozen sheets of dragon skin that were neatly laid out, dragon bones and horns, and the skull that could drive anyone insane. Where the hell did he get these things? Could it be that there was still another Dragon of Destruction in Anril? The most freakish issue was the presence of undried bloodstains on the pile of dragon bones. Holy. WW what? What are these? Kanoris' shrieks came deep from his heart. It stunned Lin Li. Lin Li stopped digging through the remains of the Dragon of Destruction. This is a long story. Unfortunately, it happens to be one of my secrets. If you are keen to know about it, you can trade your secrets with mine when I am in a good mood. It will depend on the value of your secret for me to decide to reveal it to you. Lin Li only replied Kanoris smilingly, and did not answer his questions. Deal, I will tell you all my secrets the moment we return. But, in exchange, you'd better tell me the origin of these remains. Yeah, I will consider that, Lin Li grinned. That being said, deep inside Lin Li was resolution to uncover all of the ancient demon's secrets, as well as determination to weave a good story regarding the origins of the dragon's remains. Although Kanoris could use mental strength to communicate with Lin Li, it was impossible for him to read Lin Li's mind. How would this poor ancient deity imagine that the biatch in front of him was set on patronizing him with a fictional tale in exchange for all of his secrets? Oh, yes. After retrieving the entire Dragon of Destruction from the Ring of Endless Storm, Lin Li proceeded to take out a stone. It was dull in color and had the size of a human's fist. Kanoris, what do you think of this? What's that? Kanoris asked. After all the surprise he had gotten earlier on, he could not help but feel skeptical when he saw such an uninteresting object. I'm not sure what this thing is for. But, if I didn't remember it wrongly, I found it in the brain of the Dragon of Destruction. Yeah, you did not hear it wrongly. It was located at where magical crystals are normally located. Holy, could this be the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction? Kanoris jumped. By right, this should be the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. But, Kanoris, you are an ancient deity. I presume that you can't feel any wave of mana, right? After all, we shouldn't gauge a freak like the Dragon of Destruction with common sense. That's right. Can you tell me the specifics of how you encountered this dragon? You know, if you don't tell me anything, I wouldn't know how to reply to your question, either. Definitely not the details. Lin Li rejected Kenora's request, without hesitation. But, there is one thing I can tell you. That is, my collection of the dragon's body is definitely complete, and this stone is the only thing I found in its corpse that might be related to magical crystals. My God, if this is really the crystal of the Dragon of Destruction, it will be, Kenora stammered excitedly. He lost his previous state of calmness, and continued to repeat the phrase "it will be," but did not finish the sentence. Cut the crap, Lin Li said as he pursed his lips. He was very dismayed by Kenora's lack of composure. A fool would have known that there is unlimited mana within the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. Any mage that were to acquire the crystal would never need to worry about the lack of mana again. Actually, Lin Li was watching his words very carefully. He understood that the dragon crystal was not as simple as a mere source of unlimited mana. It was a fact that the dragon aspect was one of the 4 dragon aspects that surpassed the greatness of the divine in Amril. The mana within it would be beyond imagination. 10 sanctuary masters would require 100 years to absorb the mana within it, let alone a normal mage. Moron! No one expected Kenoris to bash Lin Li with such anger. That thunderous rage made Kenoris seem like a terrifying prodigal. Who told you that you should use the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction like that? Absorb mana? Only you foolish humans would think of such a dumb method. Do you know that that is a huge waste of a magical crystal? Huh? Lin Li was stunned. Kenoris sighed. I can't blame you humans either. It is no wonder that you humans and the High Elves were the only 2 eccentric races in Amril. Not knowing what is soul inheritance, you only see magical crystals as a source of mana. You are unaware of how to utilize magical crystals. Lin Li was still stupefied from the lashing. Then how should we use the crystals? It is not a crime to use the magical crystals of the magical beasts for mana. After all, you humans had already mastered most of their natural magic powers. However, for the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction you have in your hands, you should actually think of a way to hatch it. Wait a minute, Lin Li felt that the conversation was making an absurd turn. If I didn't hear wrongly, are you saying I should hatch it? He repeated Kenoris' words again. That's right. Hatch. Are you joking? Lin Li nearly burst out laughing. I say, Almighty Soul Trader, can you be clear on the situation? This is the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. Are you saying we should hatch it? Alright, if that is so, teach me how to do it. Don't think that I'm joking with you. Think of it yourself. Are there any legends of Amril that tell you that the Dragon of Destruction needed a mate? This, Lin Li thought for a moment. He can't help but admit, I don't think there is. But, since it is just a legend, it does not mean that it is true that the Dragon of Destruction did not need a mate. Otherwise, Tutankhamun would have been birthed by a random stone. Heh. And that stone is what you are holding now, Kenoris laughed inwardly. Although I have no idea where you have gotten the stone from, I'm now even more sure that the magical crystal in your hands belonged to the Dragon of Destruction. I've read the diary of the Immortal King with Osric before. One of the entries was about the birth of the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction. You mean Tutankhamun? That's right, it was Tutankhamun. Heh. To be honest, the relationship of this descendant of the Dragon of Destruction with the dragon was not as close as he is to the Immortal King. Are you trying to tell me that Tutankhamun was hatched by the Immortal King? Lin Li gasped. He felt breathless as he tried to maintain his mental strength in the conversation. Bingo! The Immortal King killed the Dragon of Destruction, and dug out the magical crystal from his brain. After that, he hatched a pair of twins from the magical crystal. Each of the twins governed over the rules of darkness and evilness, respectively. One of the twins was the Tutankhamun you had met before. The F***CK. Lin Li couldn't hold his surprise. Immortal King is Tutankhamun's dad? It makes sense to phrase it that way as well, Kenoris replied. It was obvious that he had no interest in thinking about such a complex relationship. He ended the topic with a laugh. But, don't you dare to think that the immortal king only wanted to end the bloodline of the Dragon of Destruction by hatching the pair of twins. What else could he have wanted to achieve? The hatching process could give the immortal king more benefits than just mana. Benefits. Lin Li repeated Kenoris' words. He could not understand what Kenoris was speaking about. The hatching of magical crystals alone was a strange topic to begin with. Could a magical crystals hatch into another Dragon of Destruction? That's right, Kenoris affirmed Lin Li's doubts with a soft laughter. The term hatch is just a layman's term. The actual process is more complicated. I'm not scaring you. Although you are extremely close to the legendary realm, it will take you very long to hatch this magical crystal. Why did you even tell me, then? Lin Li snapped at Kenoris in disappointment. That fella was a real ancient deity. His vast living experience had definitely allowed him to witness many invincible existences. If he were to say that the hatching of the crystal would take a long time, it would certainly be longer than what Lin Li could imagine. But, you don't have to be disappointed. Although your current ability would not allow you to hatch the magical crystal, it does not mean that you won't be able to gain any benefits. Didn't I tell you that the immortal king chose to hatch the magical crystal over absorbing its mana? That is because the process of hatching gave him greater benefits as compared to doing the latter. What benefits? There is only one method to hatch the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction, which is to input your mental strength into the crystal to activate the bit of spiritual brand left in the magical crystal. This might sound very simple, but do know that it is like using droplets of water to penetrate a slab of stone. It would be a long and arduous process. The immortal king used a century to complete the task, and I can estimate that you would need roughly 2 decades to do the same. Why don't you just go and die? Lin Li interrupted Kenoris in agitation. Even if he were to reach the legendary realm and extend his lifespan by 100 years, he wouldn't be able to survive 2 more centuries. It would be a waste of energy to transmit his mental strength just to hatch another Dragon of Destruction for such a long period of time. Don't worry. Let me tell you, slowly. What other things can you talk about? Didn't you ask me what benefits were there to gain? The magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction not only contains a massive amount of energy, it also has the laws of darkness and evilness, as well as the experience and knowledge of the dragon. However, all such information is hidden within the spiritual brand. Instead of absorbing it from the magical crystal directly, you can just transmit your mental strength to awaken the lingering spiritual brand. The amount of laws, experience, and knowledge to seep out depends on the strength of your mental strength. A stronger mental strength would allow you to get more information from the spiritual brand. Immortal King failed to hatch the magical crystal within a few years, because he had not understood the Dragon of Destruction well. I understand it now, Lin Li said as he nodded his head. He really understood it now. In fact, it was not just the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. The same applied for the crystals for normal magical beasts. Innate spells could be passed down through the spiritual brand, and the best method to acquire them was to use mental strength to engulf that spiritual brand. That was what many mages would do. However, their mental strength was only enough to devour magical crystals below level 10. The process would become incredibly dangerous if the magical crystals were to be level 15 or higher. Carelessness would lead to the collapse of mana. Hence, the treatment for magical crystals above level 15 was usually completed through mages, as well as the more complicated alchemy arrays. As for legendary magical crystals, Lin Li had never heard any mages having the courage to devour them. However, the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction was different. Comparable to the divine, the existence of the dragon itself was as powerful as the dragon aspect. Even if the immortal king and Juresco were to come back to life, they would not have the ability to devour the innate power within the magical crystal. In fact, it was not a skill within the crystal, but a mantra, the core magical mantra of Anril. Lin Li and Kenoris had been conversing through their mental strength. Although it seemed to have been quite a while, it only took a blink of an eye. The interaction between mental strength could happen instantaneously. When Lin Li nodded to express understanding for this situation, Hutton had not yet registered the situation around him. Mage. Mage Felix, Is that the, Hutton stammered as he fixed his gaze on the black figure at the end of the pathway. It emitted such an incredibly strong force that anyone would know that it was at least a legendary existence. Although Hutton was the first heir of the Manhwa family, as well as a level 18 archmage, he had met a limited number of legendary powerhouses in his life. Now that he had trespassed the territory of a legendary figure, Hutton's fear was to be expected. Furthermore, the legendary powerhouse was the Lord of Darkness that ruled over the abyss of Tharlan. That's right, he is the Lord of Darkness, Lin Li said as he nodded. He held the ether staff in his hands. Lin Li knew that words would be meaningless before the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. How would the ruler of the abyss of Tharlan be moved by a few words? Anyway, the black figure before them was just part of the Dragon of Destruction. After the fall of the dragon, the consciousness of the Lord of Darkness had shattered entirely. What was left was just strong power and a bit of instinct. That's right, he is the Lord of Darkness, Lin Li said as he nodded. He held the ether staff in his hands. Lin Li knew that words would be meaningless before the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. How would the ruler of the abyss of Tharlan be moved by a few words? Anyway, the black figure before them was just part of the Dragon of Destruction. After the fall of the dragon, the consciousness of the Lord of Darkness had shattered entirely. What was left was just strong power and a bit of instinct. Lin Li finally understood Tutankhamun's intention behind sending him here. After the fall of the Dragon of Destruction, Immortal King had used the magical crystal to hatch Tutankhamun and his brother. They governed over the mantra of darkness and evilness. It was as good as saying that the summation of the brothers was equal to another Dragon of Destruction. But, neither Tutankhamun nor his brother was entirely complete. The reason was related to the Lord of Darkness. At this time, Lin Li even started to suspect if the Dragon of Destruction had predicted his own fall. If not, why would he let his reincarnation enter the abyss of Tharlan for just a bit of power? It was this action that caused Tutankhamun and his brother to be unable to truly grasp the mantras of darkness and evilness. It seemed that the motive of Tutankhamun in sending the three of them into the abyss of Tharlan was not only a test, but also a trick to use them to recover his lost powers. Of course, it was unlikely he wanted to do something to them. Otherwise, Tutankhamun could very well use his powers to threaten the three men to help him. He was the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction. Having inherited half of Azarda's powers, it was incredibly easy to go against archmages in their 20s. In conclusion, a battle would be inevitable. The world of Void would only disappear when the last trace of the Dragon of Destruction vanished. There was neither the teleportation portal nor the Throne of Darkness. The real Throne of Darkness was this entire world. Mage Felix, what should we do? Hutton asked in a trembling voice. After all, although the first heir of the Manhwa family was talented, this would be the first time he was going to wrestle with a legendary creature. Lin Li smiled helplessly. I only can say, let's do this. Lin Li replied after downing a bottle of potion. Huh? Before Hutton could complete a sentence, he saw the space around him distort. A humorous wyrm broke out from the void majestically with a sense of evilness and coldness. An earth-trembling growl reverberated. Instantly, death aura filled the entire world. Hutton, help me hold on to this. Lin Li threw the summoning lamp over to Hutton as he cast a levitation spell, and landed on the back of the humorous wyrm gracefully. Lin Li gripped onto his ether staff tightly and emitted an outrageous amount of magical wave. A legendary realm! Hutton exclaimed in shock. His confusion made him ignore the fact that Lin Li gave him his summoning lamp. Hutton had always thought that the young president was on par with himself in terms of ability, and that as long as he worked harder and put in more effort, he would be able to catch up with his back view. However, Hutton now knew he'd been utterly wrong. Even if it was the talented Juresco, he would never be able to enter the legendary realm at the crazy age of 20. If that were to spread, it would create a big commotion in whole Anrel, let alone in the Felon Kingdom. The news might even let the high elves that had been dead for 1,300 years jump out of their graves. Hutton felt that he was a magic talent himself. Being an archmage in his 20s, there was 70% chance for him to reach the legendary realm. Even his mentor, Cheyenne, had once said that he and Stephen were the only two such young talents in the whole of Breezy Plains. But, when Hutton watched that young president ride on the humorous WYRM, he could only feel his face getting warmer. If Mentor Cheyenne said he was a talent, what about this legendary mage who was just 20 years old? Don't be so surprised. That was the young president. He had seen through Hutton's thoughts. I'm not as powerful as you think. It was the potion, Lin Li said as he flung an empty potion bottle onto the ground. After that, the humorous WYRM spread its wings and soared into the air. It was like a humongous gray cloud hanging above the black figure. The effect of a potion? Hutton gasped as he bent his back to pick up the bottle the young president threw on the ground. He held it before his nose and took a sniff. Although Hutton was not too accomplished in the study of pharmaceutics, and was not a guru-level monster like Lin Li, he had a talent that Lin Li wouldn't be able to imagine. The Manhwa family had been known for their business in the black market. The great wealth they had accumulated over the century was comparable to the glitter gold trade unions. As the first heir of the family, Hutton had lost count of the different types of potions he had drunk from a young age. Although Hutton was not an expert in pharmaceutical studies, with the personal mentorship of the legendary mage Cheyenne, he was still well-versed in pharmaceutical knowledge. He recognized the pungent smell as soon as he picked up the bottle. That was the Seeth of Mana potion. It is indeed not as absurd as what I imagined. Hutton put down the potion bottle slowly. He had a bitter smile on his face. How could he not know the effects of the Seeth of Mana potion? The potion was just a simplified version of the all-knowing potion. The all-knowing potion could increase the level of a mage by a single level, and would give a level 19 archmage the powers of a legendary mage. As compared to the all-knowing potion, the effect of the Seeth of Mana potion was much weaker. It could help expand the mana of the mage and activate his optimal potential. If the mage was lucky and his powers were close to reaching the next level, he would be able to lift his abilities to that level instantaneously. However, the Seeth of Mana potion had a huge disadvantage. While the effect of a bottle of all-knowing potion could last for half an hour, a bottle of the Seeth of Mana potion could only last for a minute. Its effects were too short-lived. The only advantage of the Seeth of Mana potion was its minimal side effects. Mages who were healthier could afford to consume a few bottles of it together, and not worry that the side effects would be detrimental to their health. The young president was definitely not at the legendary realm. However, Hutton could really not imagine the difference between a mage that entered the legendary realm with the help of a Seeth of Mana potion and a mage who already was in the realm itself. If a mage could use the Seeth of Mana potion to enter the legendary realm, it meant that he really was one step away from the realm. In reality, this was a fact that could be overlooked. As long as this archmage wanted to invest his time, he could break into the realm any time he wished to. Hutton had always been very curious about the true powers of the young president. He did not stop wanting to test his abilities ever since he'd met him in the Blackstone Mountains, yet he was always tamed by his own fear for the president. Finally, Hutton had his doubts cleared. However, the answer made him feel utterly hopeless. It was the realization that he would never be able to catch up with this young guild president. There was an indescribable difference between an archmage in his 20s and a monster who had one leg in the legendary realm. Although it was rare to meet archmages in their 20s in the 1,300 years after the Dark Age, there were many of them in Amril now. There were at least 100 of them in just the Breezy Plains one. However, who had met a legendary realm powerhouse who was 20 years old? Even Juresco, the man who was known as the god of mages, only reached the legendary realm at the age of 30. As compared to him, this young president was exactly a decade early. It is 10 years. If Juresco was really the human god he was known for, he probably would come to the mortal world in rage after knowing someone surpassed him like that. Yet, why did the president choose the Seeth of Mana? In normal cases, if that young president wished to enter the legendary realm forcefully, he would need to use the all-knowing potion. It would last for half an hour, and was a more stable and powerful potion compared to the Seed of Mana. With that, it would be sufficient for him to complete the entire battle. Alright, if the all-knowing potion only existed in legends and President Felix had absolutely no way of acquiring it, he should have the quick-thinking potion. That was similarly a high-level pharmaceutical product. Although it did not have the ability to let the young president reach the legendary realm, the extra mana he could gain from the enhancement would be twice the amount of what he currently had. Could it be that a minute of legendary realm powers was far more powerful than doubling his mana? Yet, it was a fact that the quick-thinking potion would last for close to an hour. Hutton always thought that the Seed of Mana potion was merely a joke. The only advantage it could bring was only the fact that somebody could drink a large amount of it in a short duration of time. But, who would be so sick to do that? The Seed of Mana potion was a high-level potion that might not be manufactured in the breezy plains, and had a retail price of 12,000 of gold coins. Only lunatics would drink it like plain water. What the f***ck, could that be what President Felix is thinking of? A thought flashed past Hutton's mind. His already pallid face became ashen. Just when Hutton's face was turning white, the ice flame Lin Li cast while he rode on the humorous WYRM signaled the start of the battle. The moment the ice flame shot out of the WYRM's mouth, the black figure that had been staying quiet growled as well. The thunderous growl cleared Lin Li's doubts. He was absolutely positive that the black figure was not the real Lord of Darkness. Lin Li could hear from the growl that it was filled with pure killing intent. He knew that any living being, regardless if it were a magical beast or a demon, would have additional emotions within their growl. These emotions included anger, hatred, fear, hesitation, and many, many more. Such a pure desire to kill could only prove that the black figure before them was not only not a living being, but also not the real Lord of Darkness. The thought helped to calm Lin Li down. Although the Lord of Darkness was powerful, it had lost the intelligence of the Dragon of Destruction. That was definitely great news. An enemy that had skills but was without intelligence would never be able to maximize its potential. Lin Li's view was filled with the ice flame that covered the sky. At the same time, there was a glaring light shining through the ice flame. Lin Li bent down and saw a sharp sword tearing the void. Holy **T. It was Lin Li's first time seeing such a powerful sword attack. He did not even see the level 21 sword Sage of the Storm use one like it against the salamander when he was at the Fire Plume Ridge. The humorous WYRM was a real legendary level undead creature. Moreover, after it signed the summon pact with Lin Li to allow it to use Lin Li's massive mental strength, its combat ability rose to greater heights as compared to how it had been in the Scar of Death. Although the ice flame could not kill legendary powerhouse instantaneously, Lin Li did not expect the Lord of Darkness to be able to counter it with just a sword attack. That was not an act of defense. That outrageous sword strike was an attack that effectively countered the ice flame. Furthermore, things did not end after it went through the ice flame. The sword aimed at the humorous WYRM with a chilly aura. Despite the fact that Lin Li entered the legendary realm with the help of the Seed of Mana potion, he could not help but let his heart skip a beat when he saw that sudden attack. It was too late to make the humorous WYRM dodge the sword. Lin Li proceeded to drink another bottle of the potion without further ado. At the same time, he cast 3 slabs of ice walls. Ice Wall had been Lin Li's commonly used spell ever since he got to level 18. Not to deny, the spell was very good defensively. Juresco cast the same spell when he appeared in the Spacetime Beacon spell. His ability to also stay in the void demonstrated the reliability of the spells he chose to use. However, such a reliable spell got countered almost instantaneously. The sword of the Lord of Darkness could make many sword sages tremble with fear. This sword filled with killing intent created black flames that nothing could stop. The 3 ice walls that Lin Li built crashed with a loud sound. That's powerful, Lin Li gaped. Despite being mentally prepared for this, Lin Li could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, the spell that was filled with killing intent and force of destruction wound down after it countered the ice flame and broke the 3 ice walls. Lin Li made use of the downtime to cast an elemental shield. However, this shield was revolving around his body. The ability to cast such a shield away from the user's body was unique to legendary powerhouses. In reality, only legendary mages had the ability to partake in such a battle. Lin Li was clearly aware of this, and it was what motivated him to drink the Seed of Mana potion. Lin Li was not unaware of the effects of the all-knowing potion. Unfortunately, he only created one all-knowing potion, which he had already used it up when he was at the Scar of Death. Although the quick-thinking potion was a good product, it was not feasible to use it in this situation. There was a high chance for the Lord of Darkness to have level 21 powers. Although he had lost his previous consciousness and intelligence, and could only rely on his killing intent and instincts to continue the battle, it was definitely not what an archmage could give a run for his money. Despite having close to unlimited mana and tremendous mental strength, Lin Li could only have still unlimited mana and greater mental strength. However he tried to enhance them, he would never be able to increase his combat energy to the next level. The current situation once again testified for Lin Li's rightful decision to use the Seed of Mana potion. The elemental shield turned into 4 solar spheres that represented earth, water, fire, and wind. They were like a durable and firm shield in front of the humorous WYRM. At that instant, fire sparks splattered all over the space, and there was a loud clang that gave people goosebumps on their scalps. The noise sounded as though there were 2 thick pieces of metal scraping against each other. Aroo! The growl of the humorous WYRM echoed through the entire world. What the hell, why isn't the Lord of Souls here to usurp the throne yet? I'm really losing my energy. Lin Li thought as he let the WYRM dive forward. Yet, they brushed past the Lord of Darkness. Before Lin Li had time to react, he saw a deep wound on the WYRM's forehead. This was the way a legendary-level battle was supposed to be, malignant. That blow was deadly to the max. Despite the presence of an elemental shield and 3 ice walls, the WYRM could still not avoid being injured. If not for the aforementioned protection, that blow would have definitely sliced the WYRM's head apart. That being said, as a legendary-level undead creature, even if the strength of the humorous WYRM was not as great as that of the Lord of Darkness, it still had the ability to fight back. The moment the sword landed on its head, its claws landed on the body of the Lord of Darkness. When it was at the Scar of Death, the humorous WYRM could easily smash stone walls into powder with its claws. Even if the Lord of Darkness inherited the powers of the Dragon of Destruction, it would still suffer under the claws of the WYRM. That claws made the Lord of Darkness fly 100 meters away. Although it did not seem like the Lord of Darkness sustained any injury, Lin Li's sharp mental strength told him that the aura from the Lord of Darkness had weakened a little. The confrontation was detrimental to both parties. The crack on the head of the humorous WYRM would only be healed if Lin Li sought Sendrose's help. Otherwise, the powers of the humorous WYRM would definitely decrease by a realm. On the other hand, although the state of the Lord of Darkness was slightly better, it would also be impossible for it to recover from the injuries it had suffered, either instantaneously or eternally. God damn it. Do you know that you are playing with fire? Kanoris jumped on Lin Li's back while the 2 terrifying existences took a slight breather. I know my limits, Lin Li replied, and tightened his grip on the ether staff. He drank his 3rd bottle of the Seed of Mana potion. This meant that the battle had lasted for 3 minutes. What the F? Kanoris held back his urge of cussing at Lin Li. Do you know who is your enemy? That is the Lord of Darkness that had governed the abyss of Tharlan for 1,000 years. It is even the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction, Azardas. Do you really think you could challenge it just by relying on that hilarious potion? I beg you to wake up from your dream. Not to mention that you are using a potion to enter the legendary realm. Even if you really got into the realm naturally, you wouldn't be able to challenge that monster before having a complete magical domain. I know that. But, how would that matter? I don't plan of killing it with my own hands. I only want to buy some time. Buy time? Darn it, are you crazy? Your enemy is the Lord of Darkness, and you have the Lord of Souls that could appear anytime behind you. Now is really the prime time for you to engulf the Lord of Darkness with the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. Don't blame me for not warning you. It would be too late for anything when the Lord of Souls arrived. Do you think the demons and magical beasts at the Abyss Arena can really be an obstacle for the Lord of Souls? Of course not, Lin Li replied, shaking his head. In fact, I'm buying the time to wait for the Lord of Souls to arrive. Lin Li comforted Kanoris by giving him a pat. Kanoris drew a deep breath. Why you? You are waiting for the Lord of Souls to come? Do you think that there is too little trouble? I always pondered this question. When the Lord of Darkness defeated Mephistos that time, why did he not kill him, or use the permanent suppression on him? Why did he have to insist on slicing his soul into infinite fragments and scattering them across the abyss of Tharlan? You may not know this, but the Lord of Souls is truly an existence that could be killed and suppressed. Since the Lord of Darkness is the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction, he would have 100 ways to kill the Lord of Souls completely. Why would he choose to destroy his soul instead of killing that beast? Damn it, why would that matter to us? As long as we use the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction to engulf it, and return to Anril safely, all will be good. Why do you have to create so much trouble? Kanoris, are you still unclear on the situation? We wouldn't be able to leave this place the moment the Lord of Darkness gets swallowed by the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction. If I didn't guess it wrongly, the Lord of Souls should have long shrugged off the demons and magical beasts at the Abyss Arena. You, Kanoris' voice shook. You mean? I mean, the Lord of Souls has in fact been here for quite some time. It failed to act because of the Lord of Darkness. I dare to bet my life that Mephistos would take action the moment we use the magical crystal to swallow the Lord of Darkness. At that time, we really wouldn't have the time to regret anything. Do not forget that Mephistos does not only have the ability of a level 20 legendary powerhouse. I wouldn't be able to survive his soul storm even with the help of countless Seed of Mana potion and the humorous WYRM if I didn't use my brains. Freak! Since when did that bastard Mephistos become so sly? Kanoris sulked. At this time, he could not help but admit that Lin Li's logical analysis was correct. Spirit walkers were known to be crafty demons. As a legendary level spirit walker, Mephistos' craftiness was bound to be beyond other spirit walkers. But, Kanoris spoke after a short moment of silence. He had a new doubt. So what if you managed to buy enough time? Mephistos would never keep waiting forever, and the battle between you and the Lord of Darkness would definitely have a winner and loser. When the time comes, wouldn't Mephistos take action as well? Oh, you can rest assured about this. I can't promise other things, but there is something I am very confident about. As long as I can create the illusion that both parties are severely injured, and lure Mephistos out, I have 70% certainty that I can get rid of that sly fox. What is your idea? It is very easy, Lin Li said as he smiled craftily. Just as he was about to share the secret with Kanoris, he saw the black figure that was holding a sword move. This time, the murderous vibes became stronger and heavier. Despite being a few hundred meters away from it, Lin Li knew that it was going to be a tough battle. Forget it, I will tell you later. You should help me to tackle the Lord of Darkness now, and stop patronizing me with the seal you have. You won't benefit if I'm dead. I presume that the Lord of Souls would be very glad to swallow the soul of an ancient deity, though. Damn it. You win. Kanoris hollered through gritted teeth. Kanoris' scolding did not receive a reply, for Lin Li did not want to waste any more time. The Lord of Darkness rose up again. The strong sense of darkness and evilness were like gray clouds that covered the sky, taking away Lin Li's breath. The black flame revolving around the sword was like a black hole that had power to engulf anything in the void. It moved closer to the humorous WYRM. Damn it, that bastard Azardas really had nothing better to do. Why did he create such a strong reincarnation? It is his karma to be killed by the immortal king. Despite getting into the legendary realm with the help of the Seed of Mana potion, Lin Li could not help but feel the stress. The Lord of Darkness was too powerful. Every move of his sword let Lin Li break out in a cold sweat. That was right. Although the current Lord of Darkness did not have the intelligence of a legendary powerhouse, or any sense of consciousness, its killing intent and instinctive skills alone made it surpass the powers of normal level 20 sword sages. In reality, the attack of the Lord of Darkness was without plan. Every move was lacking in dexterity and precision. It was no different from a low-level warrior's. Even if the Lord of Darkness had such a weakness, it was still not what the current Lin Li could challenge. The power that came from the Dragon of Destruction Azardas was too inestimable. Even though it lacked coordination and dexterity, it was not what common sword sages could be on par with. Just the last blow itself was sufficient to let the humorous WYRM risk a deadly injury. Lin Li cast the elemental shield in front of the humorous WYRM the moment he saw the Lord of Darkness swing its sword. It was followed by 7 defensive spells, fossilizing, celestial blessing, and earth armor, just to name a few. If not for Lin Li's quick casting of spells that turned the head of the humorous WYRM into a metal wall, the attack made by the Lord of Darkness would have definitely inflicted another wound on the WYRM's head. Although the humorous WYRM was a legendary undead creature, a wound on its head could be fatal. It was lucky that the wound it suffered was just 2 meters in length and of a palm's width. If Sendros was willing to help when they returned, there would be an opportunity for the wound to heal. However, if it were to suffer another blow from the Lord of Darkness in the same area, it would really be a deadly one. That blow might destroy the magical crystal within the brain of the WYRM and result in immediate death. Not even the immortal king would be able to heal the WYRM then. Most of the 7 defensive spells were between level 10 to level 15, and were not any high-level spells. However, as they were cast by Lin Li, a counterfeit legendary mage, the effects were rather surprising. Although the Lord of Darkness had tremendous strength, it could only destroy 6 shields with its sword, and was not able to get through earth armor. Lin Li made use of this opportunity to cast another spell. The battle continued at a constant stunning pace. Be it Lin Li or the Lord of Darkness, none of them had a chance to take a breather. The sword of the Lord of Darkness was like a black streak of lightning that created anxiety in Lin Li. His recitations were all compressed to their limits. He only used 1 syllable to complete the recitation for the 7 defensive spells. If one did not listen to it very carefully, he would be able to hear the 7 phrases within it. However, this time, Lin Li used the entire paragraph of spell that had at least 20 syllables. That void that was filled with a magnificent spread of stars suddenly became like a sky cast with grey clouds. Snowflakes poured from the sky. Under the control of Lin Li's mana, the snowflakes came alive. Each of them had a unique shape, and the numerous icicles they transformed into turned into sharp weapons, dancing in the sky with the glimmer of magic. Snow that accumulated on the ground continued to transform into eccentric shapes and forms. The previous world of white ice suddenly changed into a trap that was filled with murderous vibes. There were snowflakes that floated down by the humorous WYRM as it hovered in the sky of glittering stars with its wings spread wide. Lin Li stood on the back of the WYRM silently. He had his ether staff in his hands and was totally rid of his previous miserable state. None of the snowflakes landed on Lin Li's body. It was as though there was an invisible sheet of armor on him that protected him from all the snowflakes. The only thing that was unusual was that these snowflakes did not land on the ground, but hovered by Lin Li's side, and continued to transform into different forms. Ultimately, these countless snowflakes changed into 100 snow monsters. Each of them had a pair of wings on its back, and was holding a long spear. What? What is that? Kanoris asked. As a former ancient deity, and having lived through the prehistoric times and the Dark Age, Kanoris had witnessed firsthand the battles between the dragons and the titans, as well as the war between the high elves and the humans. Kanoris was one of the more knowledgeable existences left in this modern world. Yet, this being who was nearly as old as Anral World could not help but be stupefied by this situation. Kanoris could not tell what those monsters that were created from the snow were. To Kanoris, that was a totally unbelievable scene. This ancient deity who had been living since the prehistoric times could not help but gasp. If these things were only unusual in appearance, it would not be of much concern for Kanoris. Yet, he was certain that these spells were at least level 18, and had a very strong aura of both light and darkness. That is something you have never seen, Lin Li replied smilingly as he put the holy light and gloomy dark back into his pocket. I created them just now. If you like, you can call them the angels of light and dark. Angels. Angels of light and dark? Alright, I will tell you the details when we return. What you should do now is to help me think of a way to reduce the powers of the Lord of Darkness. Damn it, I've drunk 4 bottles of the Seeth of Mana potion. Why is that bastard still so energetic? No wonder that cowardly Mephistos dares not take any action. Yeah, sure, let me think of a way. Just when the demon Canoris and the human Lin Li were chattering, Hutton, who had been standing a distance away, was dazed. Oh my gosh, that's the magical domain. The battle between Lin Li and the Lord of Darkness was far beyond what Hutton could interfere with. That was a battle between 2 legendary powerhouses. Although Hutton was a level 18 archmage, he knew that he would only end up with broken bones if he were to interfere. Therefore, Hutton had been a bystander from the beginning of the battle. It was not that he did not want to help, but that he did not have the ability to do so. The result of a battle between legendary figures was not something an archmage could make any impact on. It was like how an ant couldn't try to join in a weight contest between 2 elephants. The results would not change no matter how heavy the ant was. Hutton was not a fool. He knew that even if he were to go all out in such a battle, it would be impossible for him to create any positive impact on it. One magical explosion and sword attack would be sufficient to shatter all of Hutton's bones. Hence, Hutton could only hide on the side obediently and take on the bystander role, watching as Lin Li cast all the snow. Hutton would be able to tell that that was the force of the magical domain even if he was a blind man. To any mage, the magical domain would be the final magic power they acquired. When a mage stayed within the magical domain, he would have the ability to challenge real divinities. This was a strict law established by countless mages from 1300 years ago. However, it was equally difficult for legendary mages to master the magical domain. In fact, reaching the legendary realm was only the first step to the peak of the magic power. The road to the mastery and integration of the laws would be arduous, and could take up the entire life of a mage. Mentor Cheyenne once told him that usually, legendary mages only truly acquired the magical domain when they were at level 21 or level 22. The eerie situation left Hutton's mouth wide open. He was shocked that a 20-year-old archmage could create a magical domain that integrated the laws of ice, light, and darkness. If he'd heard of this possibility from others, he would have thought it to be an absurd joke. However, this joke happened right before his eyes. It carried an earth-shattering growl that pounced towards the Lord of Darkness. Lin Li stood on the back of the humorous WYRM quietly, and glanced satisfyingly at the world of ice he had created. That's right. This is a magical domain. Lin Li had experienced many battles throughout his journey from the Blackstone Mountains to the Abyss of Tharlan, and there were even a few battles that required him to confront legendary powerhouses directly. The knowledge he had accumulated over those battles had enabled Lin Li to understand the legendary realm thoroughly, and he did not stop learning when he got to the Abyss of Tharlan. The clash between the holy light and the dark decay helped Lin Li understand the mysterious magical domains a little bit better. Apart from Lin Li, no one knew how meaningful that battle was. To Lin Li, it was as though he had pushed open the gate to the legendary realm and put one of his feet in it. Through that battle, Lin Li even came into contact with the secrets of magical domains. Of course, only Lin Li knew that this magical domain was not yet complete. Earth, water, fire, wind, light, dark, and chaos were not only the 7 main elements of Amrel, but were also 7 major laws. There could be numerous laws that extended from each of these elements, whereas the laws of 3 elements, namely light, dark, and chaos, were the hardest to master. The ones who could master these most fundamental rules would be as great as the 5 dragon aspects. Despite being talented and having great potential, it would be impossible for Lin Li to grasp these outrageous rules before reaching the legendary realm. In fact, it would be unlikely for him to do so even if he got into the legendary realm. By estimation, Lin Li felt that he would only be able to master these two fundamental rules when he got closer to the sanctuary realm. However, even if he did not have the ability to grasp these two fundamental rules comprehensively, it did not mean that he could not make use of their forces. Both holy light and gloomy dark gave him great possibilities, and they were the most crucial aspect of the stars of fury. If the seven-star debris, of namely earth, water, fire, wind, light, dark, and chaos, did not exist, the stars of fury would merely be a strong weapon. Only the combination of the stars of fury with the debris of stars could let it become a true epic weapon, a weapon that only existed in myths. Lin Li had the stars of fury when he was at the endless world, and he could cast the force of any of the seven elemental powers and create seven miraculous laws as he wished. To an extent, Lin Li was no longer a real hunter at that time. Apart from the bow and arrow that he had with him for a long time, Lin Li still had the invincible elemental and rule power. It was this that protected Lin Li when he was at the Well of the Sun, and allowed him to confront one of the scariest existences of endless world, the Dragon of Destruction, Azardas, who governed over the laws of darkness and evilness. That was the greatest secret of the debris of the stars. Lin Li was the only one who knew this secret. The living legend Sendros might have known that there was the purest dark force embedded within Lin Li's tiny crossbow, yet he was definitely unaware that this purest force had the ability to let a mage create a magical domain constructed from the laws of darkness. Strictly speaking, the real thing that Lin Li mastered was just one of the laws of ice. The law of ice was not complicated. Every mage who had just started to learn magic would be exposed to a huge pool of ice element magic. Some of the spells included the Ice Mist spell and Ice Blast, and when the mages attained a higher level, they would be able to comprehend the Frost Dragon Gun and the 1,000 Miles of Ice. These spells were the most direct and simplest elaboration on the laws of ice. Years of experience would allow every mage to develop an individual interpretation of the laws of ice. The reason was very simple. The laws of ice were not whatever basic rule, but a superficial variation of the rules of water. Regardless of whether it was comprehension or mastery, it could be considered as one with the least difficulty. That made the laws of ice the least powerful among the different magical domains. The fact that it involved superficial laws and had a simplistic structure restricted the potential for this magical domain to be enhanced and modified. A clever legendary mage would never settle on just the laws of ice as his magical domain. However, it was not the case for Lin Li. With both the holy light and the gloomy dark with him, Lin Li could borrow the mantras from either of them and integrate them into the laws of ice. That would change everything. The enhancement to the magical domain made the effects that were cast a challenge for the Lord of Darkness. That was the current situation. There was a portentous killing intent within the snowy scene that could erupt any time and would be able to engulf the reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction. That was the force of a magical domain. Even if Lin Li's magical domain was not yet complete, the presence of the holy light and the gloomy dark was sufficient to terrify the Lord of Darkness. The force erupted instantaneously in that treacherous scene of snow. Countless icicles shot out from the void like sharp weapons. A maleficent glow of magic appeared, making everyone feel dizzy, and the magical beasts and demons start growling. Although their bodies were all made of ice, they were no longer pure ice. Lin Li became the godlike creator of the world and the magical domain. The magical domain had given everything within it real life and energy. As long as the weapons and magical beasts were within it, they would have to adhere to all instructions he gave, at least until a greater existence broke the magical domain. It was like what Lin Li did to Ujfalusi when he was in Sire Town. The large masses of demons and magical beasts started to rush towards the Lord of Darkness like a never-ending powerful tide. Sharpened weapons tore across the air and entrapped the terrorizing sword that Lin Li was afraid of. At once, there were blade auras, black flames, and glaring glow of magic everywhere. It was like a mirror reflecting the sky full of glittering stars. Despite having a set of supposedly impregnable powers, the Lord of Darkness lost its ability to deal with the situation. It couldn't help it. There was too much life force within the magical domain that was created by the three different laws. They had enabled Lin Li to control a force that no other level 21 legendary mages could imagine. Every sword strike that the Lord of Darkness made managed to destroy magical weapons that had been icicles, as well as slay the magical beasts and demons that had been integrated with snow particles. There was a continuous stream of snowflakes and icicles that blasted through the air with every sword stroke. Unfortunately, the Lord of Darkness met with a monster with close to unlimited mana. Under the disconcerting support of mana, the life within the magical domain never died down. The present Lin Li was even more spooky than Sendros, who had the ability to summon undead creatures. After all, although Sendros was like a fortress, the number of undead creatures he could control still had a limit. Lin Li, however, was different. He was like the god that created a world within the magical domain. Everything in that world had to submit to his desires, and numbers wouldn't be an issue at all. Not to exaggerate, as long as Lin Li's mana did not get exhausted, he would be an unconquerable force within the magical domain. Although the sword of the Lord of Darkness would destroy hundreds of magical weapons, and kill dozens of magical beasts and demons in a single stroke, it was still far from adequate. The Lord could only ensure that the rate at which it was killing all the enemies matched up to the rate at which Lin Li was creating those creatures and objects. The tide-like magical beasts and weapons seemed to be never dwindling, and the magical weapons that danced in the air seemed to be ever multiplying. The scariest thing was, those hundred of creatures that each had a pair of wings and a long spear in their hands, the angels of light and dark that even Kanoris had not met before, were still hovering behind Lin Li and not yet taking any actions. Although the Lord of Darkness had lost its intelligence and consciousness, and was just a creature which only knew how to destroy and kill, the instincts of a powerhouse helped him realize that those hundreds of monsters with wings and spears were the strongest magical weapons within the magical domain. The Lord of Darkness could feel that those hundreds of monsters each had the ability beyond level 18. There would be dire consequences if they were to participate in this battle. Damn it, Kanoris. Are you really confident? Even if the Lord of Darkness had had both intelligence and consciousness, it wouldn't have expected the human mage who was already gaining an upper hand to be more anxious than itself. Lin Li might be the only one who knew how anxious he was. It was impossible to continue to borrow force from the holy light and the gloomy dark. Both of them were the most basic rules of Anrel. Any real legendary mages who wanted to get a hold of them would require invincible powers. As somebody who was still a step away from the legendary realm, it would be impossible for him to sustain his powers. In reality, Lin Li risked the bite of mana each time he borrowed the light and dark force. That was no joking matter. The bite of mana was as scary as floods and monsters. A little bit of carelessness would result in the collapse of mana for any mage. The reason for Lin Li's good condition was his massive mental strength. He had been using this huge pool of mental strength to suppress the bite of mana. There would be great trouble when he lost the control of the mental suppression. Furthermore, the legendary skills Lin Li had was a temporary fleet he acquired from the Seeth of Mana potion. Although Lin Li was not stingy in the use of such a high-level potion, there was still a limit to all the drinking. Despite having an enormous space within the Ring of Endless Storm, it would be unreasonable to fill it with the Seeth of Mana potions when each of the bottles would only last him for a minute. Anybody would be too shocked to know anyone who could drink these bottles like plain water. In fact, Lin Li had only brought along 30 bottles of the potion. If he failed to resolve all the mess after he finished the 30 bottles, Lin Li would have bad luck. It might have seemed that Lin Li was gaining an upper hand in the battle, but he knew that he was in an extremely precarious state. He would only have 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, he could only submit to fate. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. God damn it, stop rushing me. Kanoris snapped at Lin Li. Actually, the ancient deity would have sensed the urgency of the situation without Lin Li saying anything. But, what could he do? He was not an ancient deity anymore. In fact, he was just a pathetic soul that had been sealed by Osric. I don't want to rush you, Lin Li smiled helplessly as he stood on the back of the humorous WYRM. But, I can only urge you on. Hey, almighty soul trader, can you do something about this? How could you not have a way to weaken the powers of the Lord of Darkness? What about your spells that are written in the ancient demon language? You can just recite any of them. I just need your help to weaken the Lord of Darkness by a little, and I would be able to create the illusion of both parties suffering a great injury. What on earth are you saying? Recite any of them? Kanoris nearly jumped on Lin Li's back in rage. Damn it, what was this fella thinking of the demonic runes? Were they white cabbage that could be sold by weight? Although Kanoris was a bona fide ancient deity, how could he have retained his strong powers when all the high elves had been turned into the dust of history? If it were before, why would a Lord of Darkness matter? As long as the Dragon of Destruction did not descend, he would have the ability to smash the Lord of Darkness with a finger. You really have no idea? Let me think, Kanoris muttered under his breath, and stayed silent for a moment. He was racking his brain, trying to come up with a way to deal with the Lord of Darkness. F***CKU. I knew that you couldn't be trusted, Lin Li cussed. He had no other choice but to continue to raise his mental strength to suppress the threat of the bite of mana, and continued to empty more potion bottles like plain water. The mana within him continued to stir, and Lin Li felt as though his organs were stirring as well. The sense of dizziness and nauseousness came in waves, and the pain from exerting too much mental strength was like countless needles pricking his brain. There was even a moment that Lin Li felt like he was going to die. People who had not experienced it would never know how horrifying it felt to have to depend on potions to raise their magic powers and exert their mental strength to suppress the bite of mana. Time trickled by. The Lord of Darkness was like a slaughtering machine that would never get exhausted. Its sharp sword that carried blazing black flames was like the scythe of a grim reaper as it continued to destroy Lin Li's magical domain. There were numerous lives being destroyed and numerous lives being created at every point in time, and it was as though the two legendary powerhouses were battling on a thin thread. At this time, it was not a contest that celebrated whoever that would win, but rather whoever could endure longer. Being an invincible force within the magical domain he created, Lin Li would stay uninjured as long as his magical domain did not collapse. With the powers of the Dragon of Destruction, the Lord was an insurmountable presence. With the force of the abyss of Tharlan entering the body of the Lord consistently, it would never get exhausted. That battle was fated to last. The fact that Lin Li had the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction but could not use it to swallow the Lord of Darkness was insulting. After all, the Lord of Darkness was merely a form of energy. The body of the Dragon of Destruction could be engulfed instantaneously without the dragon crystal, regardless if it was the dragon horn or bones. It couldn't be helped. His unjust fate was determined the very moment the Dragon of Destruction sent his reincarnation to Tharlan. Being the main body of the Lord of Darkness, the Dragon of Destruction could withdraw the force any time he wished. Unfortunately, Lin Li would never dare to do that. Mephistos was hiding in the shadows, and could appear any time. His sole reason for not doing that was only out of fear of the Lord of Darkness. The Lord of Darkness had to have a certain way to control Mephistos. Otherwise, the terrible Mephistos would not be that afraid of him. Hence, Lin Li had to create an illusion that both the Lord of Darkness and himself were greatly injured, misleading Mephistos into thinking that neither of them had the ability to threaten him. Lin Li had yet to send the 100 Angels of Light and Dark onto the battlefield as he was worried he might lose his final card. If both the Lord of Darkness and himself were to be really worn out, that would be a great advantage for Mephistos. Lin Li had already drunk his 20th seethe of mana potion. After feeling the number of potion bottles left in his pocket, his expression turned awful. Oh gosh, trouble is really huge. Just when Lin Li was hesitating whether or not to use the dragon crystal to swallow the Lord of Darkness before he proceeded to gamble with Mephistos, Kanoris suddenly jumped on his back. I've got it. I've got it. Since he acquired the hammer from the Eternal Furnace, Lin Li had never felt that the demon that was full of lies could be so adorable. Tears welled up in Lin Li's eyes as soon as he heard Kanoris' voice. All of his blabbering turned into a single sentence in that very moment. God damn it, speak. Kanoris might be the only ancient deity who had ever suffered a scolding. His heavy panting managed to help him suppress his urge to return the scolding to Lin Li. I can tell you the method, but you have to promise not to spread this word to anyone. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any more demons in the entire Tharlan. Kenora spoke in a negotiatory tone. What could be so powerful? It is a paragraph of demonic runes that had been passed down from the prehistoric times, otherwise known as the ancient demon language. I'm not very sure who was the creator of this language, though. I'd only vaguely heard that its creator might be the father of us, the 99 ancient deities. Are you certain that it is not the mother? Damn it, that is just a salutation. Kenora snapped angrily. He could not help it. No matter how astute and shrewd Kenoris was, he would not allow people to make such jokes. To the demons in the endless abyss, this paragraph of demonic runes is like a sharpened sword hanging above their heads. If it dropped, it would mean doomsday to all of the demons in the endless abyss. During the prehistoric times, the 99 ancient deities had sworn together not to divulge this paragraph of the demonic runes to external parties. Alright, although I've not seen myself as an ancient deity since a long time ago, I still do not wish that a human mage could make use of this demonic rune to create havoc in the endless abyss for my kind. Sure, Lin Li replied in a grave tone as he put away his earlier trickster figure. This had to be the concept of provincialism. No matter how many years had passed, and how many things had happened, it would be impossible to remove that sense of homesickness and nostalgia for his birthplace. Kenora's words made Lin Li think of that familiar world he came from. I hereby swear that if I were to divulge this paragraph of demonic runes, I will never be able to progress in the field of magic in my whole life. That's more like it. Kenora sounded very satisfied. To a mage, there would be no other vow that could be as serious. Every mage had the ambition to progress to a higher realm and attain greater magic powers. The failure to improve in the field of magic would be more terrifying than death for any mage. So, can you tell me what demonic runes they are faster? I'm really not going to last if there is any more delay. I'm not sure what that bastard lord consumed not to feel any exhaustion. If this continues, I'll really have to use the dragon crystal, Lin Li urged Kenoris as he touched the last 2 bottles of the seed of mana potion in his pocket. He had no time to waste. Do you think you can understand what I tell you when you don't know the ancient demon language? The only way now is to open your mental strength entirely and let me transfer this paragraph of demonic runes into it. Kenoris' request made Lin Li hesitate. For a mage, opening his mental strength was a very dangerous action. He had to risk being controlled by Kenoris, even if the intruder's mental strength was not powerful enough to control the mind of a mage entirely. It might still leave behind a trap to prevent the mage from perfecting his mental strength and making further progress in the field of magic. Unless there was absolute trust involved, no mage would expose his mental strength to others completely. However, the situation now required him to open his mental strength to receive the demonic runes. If not, he had to utilize the dragon crystal of the Dragon of Destruction and face Mephisto's sneak attack directly. Having been left with 2 bottles of the Seed of Mana potion, Lin Li really had no confidence to face Mephisto's as a level 19 archmage. Alright then. Lin Li agreed after weighing the pros and cons of both sides. He gritted his teeth and chose to believe Kenoris. After all, he had little choice left. He could only decide between waiting for death with closed eyes and gambling on his luck. Lin Li did not like to gamble, but if it was required for him to make crucial decisions, his readiness to gamble would surpass anyone else's. Lin Li did not give himself any room for regret. He opened his mental strength immediately after replying to Kenoris. Even an ancient deity like Kenoris could not help but admire how swiftly Lin Li made his decision to expose his vast sea of mental strength. Lin Li could feel a wave of obscure ideas rushing into his mind like a tide. There were countless pictures and information that overwhelmed Lin Li. Despite having a powerful mental strength to begin with, Lin Li had no ability to understand all the data. He could only accept the information passively. The ancient demon language is really complex. It is indeed an ancient script worthy of being next to the ancient dragon and titan language. Lin Li could not help but feel amazed by all the information. Although the ancient demon language was not known to humans, any knowledgeable mage would know that it was one of the 3 most powerful ancient scripts of Anril. Each and every rune conveyed invincible powers. If the High Elf's print was the most appropriate language to record the magic spells, the Dragon language and Titan print that were more ancient than it had to be magic spells per SE, both of them were even stronger than magic spells. It was a dream of every mage to learn the three ancient scripts. The mastery of these scripts would render all spells and gestures useless. Each and every rune within the scripts had infinite powers. Anyone would be able to cast legendary-level spells instantaneously with just a few syllables. And now, what Lin Li was learning was one of these three scripts: 1, the ancient demon language. Although it was a short paragraph, it was sufficient for a man who was about to break into the legendary realm. After he reached that stage, he would have all the time to study the language. As long as he had enough patience and precision in the research, and had the advice from the formal ancient deity, Kanoris, he would be able to derive the entire ancient demon language. When that time came, any complicated or difficult magic spells would pose zero challenge to him. Would there be any other fatal temptation to a mage who was in pursuit of higher powers? It was this reason that motivated Lin Li to open his mental strength to risk a mission he had no confidence in. If he were to lose the gamble, he could drag Kanoris down to hell with him. If he were to win it, however, not only could he resolve all problems before him, he could also gain an opportunity to learn the ancient demon language. Lin Li, who had always been cautious, could never resist this temptation. Lin Li did not like to gamble in the past, because there was a lack of sufficient temptation. This time, the temptation was huge enough. Lin Li definitely would not expect that just when he was feeling overwhelmed by all the ancient demon language, the former ancient deity, Kanoris, was also feeling overwhelmed by Lin Li's vast mental strength. When he was transmitting the demonic runes through his mental strength to Lin Li, Kanoris developed a new fear of that man. The moment when the two's mental strength integrated let Kanoris feel like a small boat sailing in the vast ocean. Despite having his usual composure, Kanoris could not help but feel confusion he had never experienced. It was like he had lost his way and was without a sense of direction. At that instant, Kanoris was very grateful to have resisted his vile temptation. As a soul, it would be a much-awaited opportunity for Kanoris if there was a powerful archmage willing to open his mental strength entirely. He could use the chance to gain control of the archmage and take over his body. This body would be more useful and better than what the eternal furnace could create. To Kanoris, Lin Li's offer was filled with temptation. Kanoris did not know how that thought appeared in his mind. However, Kanoris gave up on the intention so quickly that he did not know why he did that. Kanoris started to feel really fortunate. He was lucky for not giving in to that temptation. If not, there would be dire consequences. There weren't any ancient deities in the prehistoric age who could challenge such powerful mental strength. One could only describe the mental strength of Lin Li as horrifying. It was not what any being, even God, could take over, not to mention control. Even if one wished to leave a trap in his mental strength, they would be repelled immediately. When that happened, even if Lin Li's mental strength was totally exposed, he would have a way to drag Kanoris to hell with him. In the end, the soul trader was a businessman. True businessmen would pursue mutual benefits, and not commit themselves to a deed that wouldn't be advantageous to the parties involved. The thought of that encouraged Kanoris to loosen the knot of that mental strength package and release the paragraph of the demonic runes into Lin Li's mental strength. Boom! At that moment, Lin Li thought he heard a loud clang. Yet, it was as though he had not heard it too. There were too many things going on in his mind. Suddenly, the world became silent. It was as though the snowflakes in the air and the stars in the sky had quieted down. The crazy wind stopped howling, the snowflakes stopped dancing, and the black flames stopped burning. Lin Li could feel that even time had stopped trickling. Lin Li opened his eyes slowly, and used a renewed gaze to look at the world before him. Nothing changed, but it felt as though everything had become full of vicissitudes. The humorous WYRM was still the humorous WYRM, and the Lord of Darkness was still the Lord of Darkness. But, they were not as inaccessible to Lin Li as before. Lin Li tried to mutter a spell. He felt a never-ending stream of legendary-level energy. This can't be. Lin Li suddenly felt something was amiss. He had finished the last bottle of the Seeth of Mana potion, but why is the legendary power still within me? And it has become stronger and more real. Could it be? I know. It is the legendary realm. The legendary realm, Lin Li repeated his words. Then, he looked at the Lord of Darkness below him and smiled suddenly. You have finally reached the legendary realm, that was Kenoris, the former ancient deity. His tone was sour and riddled with jealousy. It couldn't be helped. Despite being an ancient deity that was born with tyrannical powers, Kenoris would require a long time before he could reach the legendary realm. Yet, the human mage 20 years old had already acquired a set of powers desired by countless demons. An ancient deity like Kenoris could not help but feel envious of Lin Li, who could reach the realm at such an age. I should thank you instead. Lin Li was right. If not for Kenoris, he would still need quite a few days or a month to reach the legendary realm. After all, that integration between their mental strength was not as simple as a lesson about demonic runes. Although its duration was short, Kenoris's memory and knowledge were transmitted into Lin Li's mind through mental strength. That memory and knowledge belonged to an ancient deity, and the message within it would never be what common mages could imagine. Of course, this was closely related to how Lin Li reached the legendary realm. Before this, he was already extremely close to the realm. When he acquired Kenoris's memory and knowledge, it would only be reasonable for him to achieve it. Alright, it is time to discuss things with the Lord of Darkness. Having acquired the demonic runes from Kenoris and reached the legendary realm unexpectedly, Lin Li was extremely confident regarding the rest of the battle. He was certain that both the Lord of Darkness and the Lord of Souls were going to become his prizes from Tharlan. As Lin Li raised the ether staff slowly like a flag of an army, the 100 angels of light and dark spread their wings. Snowflakes fell from the sky as they raced towards the Lord of Darkness. The entrance of the angels of light and dark transformed the stagnating battle. Before this, the Lord of Darkness still had a chance to escape despite being cornered by his enemies. However, things changed when the angels of light and dark made their entrance. After all, although these angels seemed a little frail, each of them was created with the laws of light and dark. They were the strongest life force within the magical domain. The sharpened magical weapons and vicious demons and magical beasts were nothing compared to them. These angels were at least level 18, and their energy would never dwindle as long as they stayed within the magical domain. If Lin Li's mana could be sustained, they could continue their battle until the magical domain collapsed. Their combat strategy was akin to that of the Aztecs. They had almighty physical strength that could give anyone goosebumps, and the movements of their spears were as orderly as a well-trained troops. They were a challenge to the Lord of Darkness. Most importantly, these angels of light and dark would be ready to pounce fearlessly onto the Lord as soon as they got injured. What followed would be a loud eruption of the force of light and dark. The impact would be even greater than that of the live bombs of the Aztecs. The Aztecs and their live bombs were what inspired Lin Li. Dark and light were originally two types of mantras. What Lin Li did was just merge gloomy dark with holy light forcefully. When the two forces exploded, their impact would surely be more powerful than that of the live bombs. Even if the Lord of Darkness gained its powers from the Dragon of Destruction, and even if it could absorb unlimited powers from the stars and void, it could not help but feel pressured by the angels of light and dark. It could not help it. There were hundreds of level 18 monsters that were both unafraid of death and never exhausted. To a legendary powerhouse, they were extremely threatening enemies. Furthermore, there was a Lin Li who had really acquired abilities from the legendary realm. And that was not the most fatal issue. To the Lord of Darkness, it was the spell that human mage was reciting. The spell was obscure and short. Although it only contained mere 18 syllables, the recitation of it made the Lord who only knew to kill shriek in fear. This was the first time any emotions appeared in the shrieks of the Lord of Darkness. Of course, it could very well be the last time. Lin Li held the ether staff tightly. His long black robe was flapping violently and noisily due to the crazy winds. Each of the 18 demonic runes Lin Li spat carried massive and mysterious energy from the prehistoric times. Every rune was like a nail that nailed the Lord of Darkness in his coffin securely. Finally, the Lord of Darkness let out a heart-rending growl. A sense of hopelessness reverberated across the entire world. What followed was the melting of the thick snow that had been accumulated. Snowflakes stopped dancing, and the entire world returned to its original state. There was the pathway that was filled with corpses and treasures, and the sky filled with bright shining stars. The humorous Wyrm descended and brought the pallid Lin Li down slowly. The Lord of Darkness knelt on the ground with a knee and stuck its powerful sword into the ground to support its frail body. That once formidable Lord of Darkness lost its former ruthlessness. It became like a helpless lamb at its feet and was subjected to its butchers. That paragraph of demonic runes was scarier than metal wires and chains. It had the ability to restrain souls. As long as it was a demon from the abyss of Tharlan, it would never be able to escape this force that existed since the prehistoric times. Even if it was a reincarnation of the Dragon of Destruction, the Lord of Darkness was no exception. The Lord of Darkness had lost all of his combat energy. Lin Li would be able to erase it from this world if he wanted. However, Lin Li was not much better off than the Lord. His face was white, and his massive magic waves had been reduced to the minimum after creating the magical domain and casting the demonic runes. Anyone who saw him would have thought that this young mage had depleted his last bit of strength. Of course, no one would know that when Lin Li stepped down from the back of the humorous Wyrm, the hammer on his back actually jumped. He's here. Mephistos is here. Alright, Lin Li acknowledged Canoris's words cautiously. In fact, he had seen Mephistos the moment Canoris jumped on his back. There was a sudden distortion in the void. A creature with two horns on his head, a body covered with scales, and a long tail appeared. He sneaked into the world constructed by void and stars silently like a ghost. The Lord of Darkness that had been so overbearing was now like an old dying dog, using a sword to prop up its body. Its mouth was letting out reluctant roars, but it seemed as powerless as mumblings of somebody about to die. As for Lin Li, the cause of everything, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. The magical wave on his body was as weak as a candlelight that was about to be extinguished in the wind. As long as one was not blind, they could see that both sides were undoubtedly injured. At such a time, nobody would even suspect that Lin Li was faking anything. In fact, to achieve mutual destruction with the Lord of Darkness was already something that made people feel ridiculous. Even those old men that had entered the legendary realm for a long time might not able to achieve this. Everyone would be greedy. If greed was steered properly, it would become motivation. Otherwise, it would be a sin that destroyed themselves. Even Hutton, who was just watching from the sidelines, could not help but feel moved when he saw this scene. But when he thought of Stephen was left behind in the arena, he could not help but be in a dilemma. The budding greed within Hutton instantly vanished completely. Of course, he quickly rejoiced that he did not take any action, because the person that was the most qualified to benefit from this had appeared. In the world of void and stars, a certain section of space was contorting without a sound. It was like the surface of water that a rock was thrown into. An inhuman existence had submerged into this world within the ripples. With this, a powerful aura that made people shudder had appeared. The Lord of Souls, Mephistos, had once lost the battle for reign over the abyss of Tharlan. This poor thing had been bombarded till his soul was suppressed from all directions. But now, nobody dared to relate poor thing to him. His head had two horns that were curved and threaded. He had a tall forehead and deeply set eyes. The rims of his eyes were peerlessly black. The closely woven scales were made indistinct by the cyan-colored soul flames that surrounded him. Just like most demons, there was a pair of gigantic wings growing on his back. It was just that the wings were enveloped by the soul flames as well, and seemed to be constantly burning. Although the long tail was not thick and muscular, it was serrated till the end. An average person would not be able to handle a hit. It's been 1,300 years. I've long waited for this day. I can finally take back what belongs to me. Mephistos, who showed his whole body, threw his head back and roared as though he was venting. It was definitely a pleasant moment for anybody that was suppressed for more than 1,000 years. Excitement and agitation, all sorts of feelings interlaced when the wait of 1,300 years to reap rewards had finally ended. This made the soul flames that enveloped his body flicker constantly. Me. Mephisto's. Hutton covered his mouth forcefully, fearing that any noise would attract Mephisto's attention. His current mood was like he had just placed his clothes in the sun to dry after the rain, but another rain cloud overshadowed the sun completely. Despair, especially despair that came after hope, was something unbearable that was far beyond anybody's tolerance. Now, he could only fight, but could he win? Hutton turned around and saw the feeble mage Felix. Could it be that this miracle creator in his eyes could create even more miracles? Up till this point, Hutton suddenly thought of everything he had experienced since entering the abyss. How could they be pleasant scenes if not for this young president that was constantly creating miracles? Thinking about this point, he could not help but be in a dilemma again. It was as though everything that happened was unexplainable to him, except for encountering the Aztecs. Be it locating the throne of darkness or going through the ancient arena, and then the encounter with the overwhelming Lord of Darkness, if it were not because of this mage Felix, it was as though he would not have accomplished anything. The arrangement that the family had passed down was not like a treasure passed down to future generations, but instead more like a trap with no way out. Growling, Mephisto's let out a roar that echoed in the whole space, and the soul flame covering his body was restrained. Lord of Darkness, have you already become so useless? You actually got beaten up to your last breath by a little mage that had just entered the legendary realm. Seeing the current state of this enemy that had suppressed him for 1,300 years, his heart was indescribably elated. It was as though the Lord of Darkness understood the mockery within Mephisto's words, for it dragged its body and replied with a furious roar. It was just that when it was heard by Mephisto's, that roar no longer had any threat. It was just so amusing and comical. Little human mage, you really prepared a decent gift for me. Cyan soul flames appeared on both Mephisto's hands. He turned his face slight and looked at the feeble Lin Li. Everything was progressing smoothly, and it was all within Mephisto's calculations. Originally, he planned to let them weaken the Lord of Darkness by a bit and save himself some strength. He had not thought that this young human mage would have actually fought with the Lord of Darkness till both were worn out, and all he needed to do now was to reap the rewards. Reaping rewards was the most exciting thing, especially after waiting for a millennium. Especially so when he could collect the rewards without doing anything, just like now. Lord of Darkness, you've humiliated me 1,300 years ago. Now, it is time for me to return the favor. Your soul shall enjoy eternal sorrow and pain within the storm. Mephisto's brutally roared and clapped the soul flames in his hands furiously. Immediately, a wave was produced in the space. The soul flame was like thunderclouds covering the entire sky above everybody's head. The cyan flames burned the void overhead. Actually, none of this could be seen by the naked eye, but it was reflected in the audience's souls. With that, there was a suffocating pressure and a soul-tearing pain. Nobody thought that the Lord of Souls, Mephisto's, would be so impatient. He actually did not investigate further, and used a powerful spell even though he was facing two enemies that were heavily wounded to try settle things within the shortest time. Roar, offer your souls and become the almighty Lord of Souls Mephisto's, strength. This is the highest honor I confer to you. Mephisto's excited roar and the cyan fiery clouds in the sky produced a giant vortex. The tearing force became even more irresistible. Ah! The final hope in Hutton's heart had been completely shattered by the descent of the soul storm. That pain of soul being torn apart made him curl up on the ground. All of the muscles in his body were tense, shivering while waiting for the final moment to arrive. It's over, it's really over this time. Fear and despair took over Hutton's whole mind, and he suddenly felt powerless. Facing the battle of the legendary level, he was too weak like an ant that was constantly stomping on an elephant's head. The elephant wouldn't even notice its existence. Hey, stop acting. If you continue acting, we are all goners. Kenoris shouted at Lin Li in panic. His hopes of escaping were resting on this kid's shoulders. If he were to be finished, Kenoris would definitely not have a good ending when he ended up in Mephisto's hands. Lin Li, too, was suffering under the soul storm, but he had to wait for an opportunity to make a move. Whether this opportunity was correctly grasped by him could be said to be the most crucial part of this plan. If there were any slight mistake, it would end in self-destruction. The current Lin Li was now like walking on a tightrope. On his left was the Lord of Darkness, and on his right was Mephisto's. If everything proceeded smoothly, then there'd be nothing to discuss. But if anything were to go wrong, Lin Li would definitely die without leaving any remnants even if he now had legendary realm powers. The battle between legendary powerhouses was too dangerous. Every move had a cataclysmic power. To enter the vortex without ample preparation was no different from courting death. The Lord of Darkness roared continuously, venting the anger and unwillingness within. However, that level 18 curse made from demonic runes was like 10,000 mountains crushing its body, making it impossible for it to stand straight. It could only allow Mephisto's soul storm wreak havoc above it. Mephisto's had been suppressed for 1,300 years, so his powers were far from his peaks. Other than taking back the position of the ruler of the Abyss of Tharlan, it was more important for him to regain his powers. In his eyes, the Lord of Darkness that had been severely injured by Lin Li was the best source of power. If he devoured the Lord of Darkness' soul, not only would it immediately replenish his strength, but he would also master the laws of darkness, allowing his power to completely change. Mephisto shifted the eye of the soul storm to the Lord of Darkness while holding on to this thought. The two human mages were irrelevant to him. Even if one of them had already reached the legendary realm, the Lord of Darkness was better when compared. The soul storm was wreaking havoc in between the void and stars. Light, darkness, and ice. The magical domain, created by 3 magical elements, was like a cottage shaking and crumbling in a storm. Mephisto's powers grew stronger and stronger. Every swirl of the soul storm was directed at the depths of the soul. This was a fatal test for any living being. Even with Lin Li's strength, he could only desperately raise his mental strength to protect the soul brand. For a mage at Lin Li's realm, forcibly raising mental strength was already something very harmful. Every time he compressed his mental strength, it would bring great harm to his body. Such harm would require a lot of time to recover from. But Lin Li had no choice. If he were not to be desperate at this time, he would no longer have a chance to win. Mephisto's had completely swallowed the soul brand. The soul storm was like a vortex in the sea, deep and gloomy yet irresistible. Initially, it only covered an area of 100 meters, but as Mephisto's powers grew, the area of the soul storm grew larger. In just under 10 seconds, the raging spiritual force had already covered the whole world constructed by the stars and the void. What the hell? Kenoris' voice was filled with panic. A being like himself that had survived for countless eons, he would be beyond redemption if his soul brand had been completely consumed. It's over. The distant Hutton's face grew pale. The powerful spiritual force was like a chain that locked down Hutton's body. He could not even summon the strength to cast a low-level spell at this time. The only thing he could do was look at Mephisto's wreaking havoc with a face full of despair. But for Lin Li, this overwhelming soul storm made him see a dawn of victory. Now, Lin Li's acutely sensed the change in the soul storm. When Mephisto's placed its center on the Lord of Darkness, Lin Li furiously released the bindings fettering the Lord of Darkness. Roar! The Lord of Darkness's body immediately became light. The powers that disappeared re-emerged in its body. This happy feeling that enveloped it made it roar into the sky. It stood up while making use of this opportunity, and the sword in its hand was raised again. If it was a mentally sound person, the target with the highest priority would be the one that threatened him the most. In this case, it would be Lin Li that grasped the ancient demonic runes that could suppress the Lord's powers. However, the current Lord of Darkness was a killing machine running on basic instincts. It could not be reasoned with. Whoever was attacking it would have to suffer its rage. Thus, Mephisto's who was trying to swallow it became the biggest target in its eyes. What? Mephisto saw the Lord of Darkness stand up. Coupled with the tragic experiences of the past, it immediately gave him a shock, but he calmed down after a while. He would not imagine that Lin Li was using the ancient demonic runes to suppress the Lord of Darkness. He only thought that the Lord of Darkness used some sort of desperate means to recover a bit of strength. "Stop struggling, your powers belong to me," he shouted hideously. The soul flames on his body abruptly erupted. The vortex in the soul storm became smaller through compression, but the soul-tearing power became stronger, and it was directed at the head of the Lord of Darkness. The Lord of Darkness was inside the soul storm, but its majestic body did not move. Its destructive aura constantly rose, and the sword in its hand was accumulating terrifying power. Boom! The Lord of Darkness' cataclysmic strike slashed at Mephisto's soul storm. With this strike, Mephisto's complexion finally changed. The destruction it brought reminded him of an identical strike that had shattered his soul 1,300 years ago. Even though the destruction this time was not like before, this heaven-splitting strike split apart Mephisto's soul storm from within. **T, you actually plotted against me with a human," Mephistos yelled in exasperation. At the same time, he lifted both his fists and the soul fire on his body abruptly exploded. "I want to trap your soul and use the soul fire to burn it for thousands of years." Seeing that the Lord of Darkness and Mephistos were fighting each other and causing loud booms as their bodies moved, Lin Li finally let out a sigh of relief. Hee, they are fighting. Although the Lord of Darkness isn't as powerful as before, there shouldn't be any issues for it to fight against Mephistos, who had been suppressed for over 1,000 years, on its home grounds. Kanoris sheepishly laughed. As Lin Li's accomplice, seeing that notoriously cunning Lord of Souls Mephistos falling into Lin Li's trap gave him a sense of achievement. Lin Li did not carry on the conversation. Although he was still pale, he was constantly watching the battle between the two rulers, past and present, of the Abyss of Tharlan. Such a scene was not something that could be seen every day. The two powerhouses, even though one had lost all reason, and the other had his shattered soul sealed for 1,300 years, weren't something that an average legendary realm powerhouse could compare to. Lin Li reached the legendary realm at the age of 20. In the aspect of magical talent, he could be said to be a genius among geniuses. Many people even compared him to Juresco. However, there was one thing that was not related to talent involved, and that was experience. In fact, the amount of time that Lin Li had spent practicing magic was also used for accumulating experience. This included individual research as well as learning from people like Anduin, Old Grim, and Apophis. One should know that these people had easily researched magic for at least 100 years. Apophis was even an old monstrosity that had lived for over 1,000 years. In terms of combat experience, it was simply more than many people that had experienced eating and battling with masters ever enjoyed, and it was also one of important avenues where he gathered experience. How could Lin Li, who grew up this way, not know that witnessing a high-level battle was important for improving his own abilities? The battle of the two rulers of the Abyss of Tharlan undoubtedly was at a genuinely high level. For Lin Li, the potential benefits that this battle brought about would definitely be better than his researching magical techniques in solitude for months. Hutton, who was already prepared to die, wiped off the sweat on his face. His body was already drenched in sweat. He glanced at the two rulers of the Abyss, and turned his bewildered face to look at Lin Li. He could not describe what exactly he was feeling. He just inwardly screamed, could it be that this was also his plan? If it is so, then that man is simply too terrifying, be it his schemes or abilities. President Felix was a person that could not be made an enemy even if he could not be a friend. Hutton thought of his worthless brother, and could not help but feel hatred. If it was not because of the issues he'd caused, I would be able to become closer with this mage Felix by quite a bit just from this expedition into the Abyss. Seems like I'll have to teach that worthless fellow a lesson when I return before he causes a disaster for our family one day. During the battle between the rulers of the Abyss of Tharlan, the whole space was constantly shaking, and the clashes of energy produced ear-rupturing explosions. It was just that during this constant clashing, the cyan soul flames of Mephisto's looked like snow slowly melting under the rays of the sun. Damn. I'm not convinced, I'm not convinced. Mephisto's roars tore through the entire space. It was just a few exchanges, and the soul flames on his body dimmed considerably already. He could not understand why the Lord of Darkness would scheme with a human mage against him. Mephisto's gathered all of his strength, and his entire body was like a sun radiating cyan light. Now, it was no longer an issue of reaping rewards. Facing the pressure of the Lord of Darkness, he no longer had a way to retreat. Only by fighting with all of his might would there be a way out. Roar. The Lord of Darkness let out an angry roar. It did not give a single chance for its opponent to catch his breath as the sword in its hand slashed at Mephisto's. It was a single cataclysmic strike that seemed enough to destroy the whole space, and it landed heavily on Mephisto's. Time seemed to have stood still for a moment, and afterward came a loud boom. Mephisto's body was like a shattered mirror, and he was once again blasted into smithereens. Hutton, I'll leave these fragments to you. Use the summoning lamp to collect them. Not a single one can escape. Lin Li did not wait for Hutton to reply after speaking. He jumped onto the humorous WYRM and soared into the sky. After that, the light and darkness magical domains appeared again. The tone of Lin Li's command would have made Hutton resentful if it had been at the beginning of their expedition into the abyss of Tharlan. However, after going through so much, Hutton had seen Lin Li enter the legendary realm and saw him scheme against two rulers of the abyss of Tharlan. His heart could not produce any form of resentment. This was respect for the strongest. Just as the voice fell, an incomparably strong mental strength surged into Hutton's mind. Countless memory fragments as well as a transcendental incantation were etched clearly into his mind. This was the strength of a legendary powerhouse. Once humans entered this realm, it also meant they were half a step into the domain of deities. Many methods deemed unimaginable by humans were available to them, just like what Lin Li just did. He directly used mental strength to affect Hutton. No matter how hard the incantations were to comprehend, they were all mastered by Hutton in an instant. When the incantations entered his mind, Hutton also used the levitation spell. His whole body was flying like a gigantic bird. The summoning lamp in his hand steadily gave off a dazzling radiance along with the recitation, and countless soul fragments appeared in the radiance. When each rune came out of Hutton's mouth, large amounts of soul fragments would be sucked into the demon magic lamp. Looking from afar, it was like countless moths were flying straight into the fire. This time, Lin Li would not have to expend so much strength when facing the Lord of Darkness. In fact, with the ancient demonic runes that Kanoris had provided, he did not have to exchange many blows with the Lord of Darkness at all. The storm clouds were rolling above his head, and snowflakes were floating down, immediately turning Lin Li's surroundings into an icy world. It seemed like there was a life form gathering the snowflakes. Angels of light and dark, with black and white wings, appeared beside Lin Li one by one. Their bodies had conflicting auras of light and darkness, yet it all harmonized so naturally it did not look out of place at all. Everything seemed to have repeated itself. Lin Li raised the magic staff in his hands high up, and countless angels of light and dark surged upwards, binding the Lord of Darkness on the ground. When the Lord of Darkness let out a roar of despair, Lin Li slowly recited the 18 ancient demonic runes. Roar. The Lord of Darkness roared gloomily. It did not know what that human did, but the power within its body escaped its control again. No matter how it summoned it, not a single shred thereof could be invoked. Lin Li maintained the magical domain and asked, Kanoris, how do I keep this guy in the dragon crystal of the Dragon of Destruction? Hurry up and say something. Don't be hasty. I'll tell you now, Kanoris said while he sent a segment of demonic runes, bound to mental strength, into Lin Li's mind. Creating and using a clone to do things in place of the actual body was not the Dragon of Destruction's expertise. Ancient deities like Kanoris would usually use their clones to move around Anril and even take part in wars that could change the world, gaining benefits for themselves that way. Hence, receiving a clone back into the original body was something difficult. The current Lord of Darkness was like a goat waiting to be slaughtered with its 4 hooves tied to the board, only waiting for the cut at its throat. Lin Li took out the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction and recited the demonic runes that he'd just learned. The magical crystal that was originally plain like a rock was now slowly emitting faint light. Roar! The Lord of Darkness seemed to have sensed something, and instinctively struggled desperately, trying to avoid the knife that was aimed at its throat. Maybe after tens of thousands of years, it could actually gain its own sentience while retaining the identity of the Dragon of Destruction's clone. Unfortunately, it only had some basic instincts. It could not produce any significant resistance against the absorption from the Dragon of Destruction's magical crystal. With a sad cry, the Lord of Darkness' body disintegrated, losing all semblance of a human form. It transformed into a patch of black energy, and flew towards the magical crystal in Lin Li's hand. Hutton landed on the ground and raised his head, looking at Lin Li in the sky with shock and a wide-open mouth. He had already absorbed Mephisto's soul fragments into the summoning lamp without leaving a single one behind, and was ready to watch how Lin Li dealt with the Lord of Darkness. However, he did not think that what had appeared before him was a shocking scene. An unknown stone in Lin Li's hand was swallowing the Lord of Darkness like a whale swallowing water, and the overbearing Lord of Darkness did not have any power to resist. Finally, the last bits of the Lord of Darkness' strength were absorbed into the Dragon of Destruction's magical crystal. The rock that was radiating light returned to its original state, without anything looking unusual except for it being ugly. This thing really can hatch into something like Tutankhamun? What did the immortal king do as a nanny back then? No matter how much he knew Kenoris would not lie to him, Lin Li could not imagine a scene where this rock would hatch into a 2-headed dragon. Ho ho, I like this name, Nanny. Of course, what the immortal king provided was not milk, but mana and mental strength. Kenoris laughed twice, and continued, to hatch the magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction, the mana and mental strength required are immense. Mana can be replaced with other magical crystals. It's not too much, about 100 legendary level magical crystals would be enough. 100. It's not too much. Lin Li almost choked on his saliva. Were legendary magical beasts so fun to provoke? Even if he could deal with legendary level magical beasts, where would he be able to find 100 of them? The summoning lamp from the Brilliant Shrine was already something only for a lavish spender of magical crystals. Now, there was a magical crystal of the Dragon of Destruction, and it required legendary magical crystals. Each and every one of them was a bottomless pit. Be content with that. Think about the Dragon of Destruction's power and Tutankhamun that sent you here. 100 legendary magical crystals really do not amount to much. Kenoris' words somewhat meant that talk was cheap. Fine. After all, it does not require so many at once. Continue speaking. What's next? Lin Li knew that what Kenoris said was the truth, so he could only resign himself to his fate. So far, I've mentioned the requirements in mana. As for mental strength, only you can bear the burden. Use mental strength to slowly awaken the soul brand within the magical crystal, and make it develop a feeling of reliance and intimacy through communicating at the pure mental level. This is something that others can't replace. After all, you wouldn't want to let others enjoy your hard work's fruits. Kenoris had merely seen the records of hatching the Dragon of Destruction's magical crystal in the Immortal King's diary. He was rather interested in seeing the process and results of hatching it. I've talked about how mana and mental strength could only be done by you. The best way is to keep this magical crystal by your side so that every time you utilize mental strength when casting a spell, it will bathe the magical crystal in your mental strength waves. During this process, you will communicate with the magical crystal at the pure mental level, and the soul brand in the magical crystal will be slowly awakened, thus developing a sense of reliance and intimacy towards you. Of course, this is a work like grinding rocks with water. It is not something that can be completed in a few days. So troublesome. During this process of hatching, you will obtain the knowledge, experience, and rules contained within as your mental strength and the magical crystal's soul brand are communicating. Of course, how much you will obtain depends on how strong your mental strength is. At the same time, the power of your mental strength will also affect the length of time before you successfully hatch it. Back then, the immortal king needed 100 years. As for you, reaching this point, Kanoris thought of the scene when he directly sent demonic runes into Lin Li's consciousness. He had not seen the consciousness of the immortal king or Juresco, but Lin Li's mental strength was definitely the strongest he had ever seen. As for whether Lin Li would surpass the immortal king or Juresco, it really was worth waiting to find out. Lin Li placed the Dragon of Destruction's magical crystal back into the Ring of Endless Storm. This hatching process was the work of grinding rocks with water, so this little bit of time was insignificant. What was the most important now was how to find the Throne of Darkness and exit this place. Of course, before leaving, the good stuff here could not be left behind and continue to collect dust. Do you know where the Throne of Darkness is? Lin Li gazed into the distance, but the world constructed of the void and stars was the same everywhere. There seemed to be no end. Only God knew where the Throne of Darkness was. The Throne of Darkness is actually this world constructed of the void and stars, Kanoris said. F*ck, why couldn't they find a chair? Which stupid person gave it this name, actually calling this place a throne without thinking who would dare to have such a large *ss. Lin Li swore with resentment. No wonder he saw the Lord of Darkness standing when he first entered. There was no throne at all. This space was created by the Dragon of Destruction for his clone. Here, the Lord of Darkness's abilities would be strengthened immensely, while other demons would suffer from suppression. Hence, as long as the Lord of Darkness was here, the whole abyss of Tharlan would be almost an unbeatable area. Previously, you were able to go against the Lord of Darkness, and other than the demise of the Dragon of Destruction and the Lord of Darkness powers weakening, it was also because you had your own magical domain. While being in this world, you also created a mini-world where you called the shots, causing the influence of the Dragon of Destruction to be at the lowest, Kanoris explained. It really was, you have to listen to me when you are in my territory. This was the power of the magical domain. Lin Li thought for a bit, and asked, then, how are we going to get out? As the Dragon of Destruction has already fallen, this space exists because of the Lord of Darkness. Once the Lord of Darkness disappears, this place would naturally collapse and disappear. Frack. Why didn't you say so earlier? Lin Li was shocked when he heard this explanation, and quickly said, what about the treasures over there? When is the space disappearing? I have to collect those items. After all, he was now a president. The Tower of Dusk was a gold-guzzling machine. Making potions was profitable, but he could not just stay in the pharmaceutical lab and concoct potions all day while doing nothing else. If he could obtain these treasures, he would not have to be flustered over money for a long period of time. He could focus on consolidating his magic practice and do what he wanted to do. Don't be hasty. I did not aim for these treasures for just a few days. I prepared the solution a few thousand years ago. Kanoris laughed complacently. Kanoris sent another segment of ancient demon language into Lin Li's consciousness, and said, because the Lord of Darkness has already been fused into the Dragon of Destruction's magical crystal, this Throne of Darkness has already lost its master. You can leave behind your own soul brand on the Throne of Darkness by using this demon language phrase and become the new master of the Throne of Darkness. As for those treasures, won't they belong to you? Is that so? I wouldn't be kept here forever, right? Lin Li asked carefully. This Throne of Darkness is actually similar to the Eternal Furnace. They both float within a crack of space. As long as you find another crack of space outside, you can summon it whenever you like. Hutton saw Lin Li steer the humorous WYRM to land and quickly brought the magic lamp over, saying, President Felix, we have to find the Throne of Darkness next. I wonder if you have any suggestions? Lin Li took over the magic lamp, and smilingly said, don't be hasty, we can't leave immediately. All of their experiences after entering the abyss of Tharlan had allowed Lin Li, this young president of the Guild of Magic, to leave an impression in Hutton's mind that he was omnipotent. Achieving the legendary realm by 20 years of age, single-handedly defeating the Lord of Darkness left behind by the Dragon of Destruction, and screwing over the notorious Lord of Souls, Mephistos, while he was at it. From Hutton's point of view, this was no longer considered human. Only the word demonic could be used to describe this monstrous young president. Hutton was even unable to imagine whether there was anything in this world that this monster could not achieve. Since this monster already had plans, then Hutton would naturally be at ease and patiently wait. After all, everything had already surpassed his imagination. Even if he wanted to worry, he did not have the ability. Lin Li glanced at Hutton and did not do much. He just gently closed his eyes, and the ancient demonic runes that Kanoris had sent in appeared in his consciousness. His lips moved, and obscure syllables escaped his mouth. The magical elements in the surroundings started seething. The light and darkness of the countless stars in the void started superseding each other. The whole world was filled with a mysterious yet powerful energy. All of a sudden, all of the stars dimmed. After that, they suddenly erupted with a brilliance that was 1,000 times bigger than before. It was like the destruction of the world and the stars shattering. It was like thousands of suns had emitted light steadily all of a sudden. At that instant, Lin Li suddenly felt that he fused together with the throne of darkness. A shred of understanding appeared spontaneously in his mind. This is the power of the Lord of Darkness domain. That's right. This throne of darkness was originally made by the Dragon of Destruction for its own incarnation. There's even a portion of the evilness and darkness rules included inside. The Lord of Darkness just needs to be within the area of the domain, and its power would always be at its peak. Unfortunately, the Dragon of Destruction fell, and the domain got weaker day by day as it lost its source of power. If not, do you think you would have had any chance just now? Even at this point, Kanoris' voice still had a tinge of lingering fear. It was only at this point that Kanoris understood that he'd been wrong all along. This young mage was definitely not as gentle and harmless as he seemed. Only after this incident did Kanoris find out that this fellow was a true lunatic, because only lunatics would be so reckless. Just look back at the situation previously. This fellow was inside the throne of darkness. In front of him was the raging Lord of Darkness, while behind him, Mephistos was eagerly coming in for a backstab. What this fella thought about was not escaping, but how to kill of Mephistos and the Lord of Darkness at the same time. This. If this wasn't being AF** King Lunatic, then what was it? And he did it. Just thinking about this, Kanoris could not help but curse. The rules of darkness? At this point, Lin Li did not have time to care what Kanoris was thinking about, because Lin Li had already fused his mental strength with the throne of darkness, leaving his own brand on this powerful domain that the Dragon of Destruction had created. From this point on, this powerful domain completely belonged to Lin Li. Lin Li could control the powerful energy at will, and he could even fumble around the portion of the rules of darkness that was contained within the domain itself. Although the rules of darkness contained within were incomplete, they were still miles apart when compared with Lin Li's laws of ice. It couldn't be helped. Even though the ice domain was formidable in his hands, in the end, it was still the most superficial and low-level use of rules. There was absolutely no room for comparison when placed beside fundamental rules like light and darkness. Lin Li could even confirm that when he completely mastered the included rules of darkness, the gloomy dark in his hands would become an even more terrifying weapon. How's it, not too shabby, right? This is the magical domain that the Dragon of Destruction had created. The rules of darkness contained within are more complete than the mastery of any mage in this world. If you were to completely master these rules of darkness, you might be able to infuse them into your own magical domain too. No, I don't plan on fusing these rules of darkness into my own magical domain. Lin Li shook his head, disapproving of what Kanoris said. Why, power that belonged to yourself is the best. I would never reach the peak of magic if I relied on engulfing and fusing. This time, Lin Li was not lying. Although fusing magical domains could bring powerful strength, it would also produce some very troublesome side effects. The worst ones could even cause rule disorder. It was not that the more rules there were, the better the magical domain. Only one genuinely powerful rule was required, and it was enough to push the powers of the magical domain to the peak. Lin Li did not understand these principles before, But after observing Juresco's battle through the space-time beacon spell, Lin Li slowly felt that he seemed to have discovered something. If that is the case, after hearing what Lin Li said, Canoris did not continue convincing him. He just took a pause, and then again suggested, I do have a plan that can allow you to execute this magical domain's power fully. What is your idea? Eternal furnace. What you mean is, to fuse the throne of darkness into the eternal furnace? That's right. The current eternal furnace does not have much combat power other than the ancient dragon's magical crystal. If you were able to fuse the throne of darkness into it, it should be able to restore some of the floating castle's former glory. This is worth considering. After being reminded of it by Canoris, Lin Li could not help but nod his head. The last time, he saw that the blueprints of the Sky Castle seemingly used a gigantic conquering mageweth. Unfortunately, even though the conquering mageweth's strength was monstrous, the blood of 100 dragons necessary for it made people feel too hopeless. Although the throne of darkness could not be compared to that monstrous conquering mageweth, its powers after fusing into the eternal furnace couldn't be underestimated. Seems like I have to do some research when I get back. Oh, yes. Once you have fused the throne of darkness into the eternal furnace, don't forget to build a new body for me. I know. After Lin Li impatiently brushed off Canoris, he turned around again and called out to Hutton, who was dozing off. Mate Hutton, start preparing. We can leave now. Oh, okay. After Hutton nodded his head, he suddenly remembered something. Oh, yes. President Felix, Stephen. I wouldn't know about that. Maybe Mephisto's knows, do you want to ask him? Hutton almost choked on his breath, and scolded himself for being an idiot that had nothing better to do. Of all things to ask, he had to ask about Stephen. He did not think who this young president was. He was truly cold-hearted. If he were to think that Hutton were collaborating with Stephen and really made Hutton ask Mephisto's, then wouldn't that be equal to shooting himself in the foot? Okay, let's go. Lin Li glanced at Hutton. His mental strength surged out like raging waters and activated the throne of darkness that had his spiritual brand on it. In an instant, a crack tore open in the dark void and Lin Li walked out. Their surroundings started becoming clearer. When the two of them regained their senses, they had already returned to the small wooden hut. Everything was the same as when they'd left. Tutankhamun was sitting at the side of the table, smiling. Welcome back. Mr. Tutankhamun, we have found the Palace of Darkness in the Abyss of Tharlan as per your instructions. Does this mean we have passed your test? Lin Li knew there was nothing much to say. With Tutankhamun's abysmal abilities as well as the ambiguous relationship with the Dragon of Destruction, he had to have already known everything that happened in the Palace of Darkness. That aside, Lin Li was actually a little worried. He'd once suspected Tutankhamun made him go to the Abyss of Tharlan to help Tutankhamun retrieve a part of the rules that the Dragon of Destruction had left for the Lord of Darkness, but now this whole magical domain was in Lin Li's hands. If Tutankhamun were to ask for it, should Lin Li return it or not? Lin Li definitely would not give it up for free. Was this a joke? It was something that he'd snatched from Mephisto's and the Lord of Darkness while placing his life on the line, so how could it be given to anyone for free? But, it didn't seem like he could reject it. Tutankhamun still held the 3 treasures of Juresco. Tutankhamun seemed to have seen through Lin Li's worry. He shook his head while smiling, and said, yes, you have passed. Indeed, you are the chosen one. As for Stephen, who did not return together with them, he did not mention him at all, just as though he had never seen that person before. What? Choose what? Lin Li, who was conflicted in his heart, did not return to reality at that point, so he failed to hear Tutankhamun properly. Hutton heard it more clearly at the side. It was something about an arrangement from 1,300 years ago and that this something was to be done as a formality. Hutton cupped his ears, wanting to listen to more secrets, but Tutankhamun did not allow him to do so. He waved his hand and sent Hutton off. Lin Li shot a glance at the spot where Hutton disappeared, and continued, Mr. Tutankhamun, you said the chosen one. What does that mean? You will know about this later. Since you've passed the test, then these 3 items will be passed to you as arranged. Tutankhamun did not answer Lin Li's question, but gave him the 3 items that Juresco had left behind instead. Lin Li was finally at ease. It seemed like he did not have to exchange anything. Since it was like this, there was no need to stand on ceremony. Lin Li impolitely pocketed the items with excitement. "You still remember what we talked about, right?" Tutankhamun asked. Lin Li, who just kept the items, nodded his head, and said, "Yes, the issue about the crack of space." This time, he also thought that these 3 items were not given for free. No matter how much he did not want to be a savior, there were some things that he had to do for his own survival. That's right. You must remember that there is not much time left. If you are unable to reach the sanctuary realm before the crack of space opens, then there'll be dire consequences. Yes. Lin Li nodded his head and did not ask what the consequences were. After all, those consequences surely would be something like the total destruction of Amril. Lin Li was not concerned whether Amril would be destroyed or not, and he had no interest in becoming some great hero that saved the entire world. But the issue was that once the tier of space opened, countless prehistoric magical beasts would charge into Amril. This was not something funny. If it was not dealt with properly, it could be fatal to everyone. Lin Li was not willing to save the world, but if he could save his life by saving the world, Lin Li would not mind it. But, wasn't the sanctuary realm a little too far? Furthermore, it had to be within 3 to 5 years. This was simply forcing him to do the impossible. Although he had already obtained the 3 treasures of Juresco, only a mage that had truly broken through to the legendary realm would know how hard it was to proceed to the sanctuary realm from the legendary realm. Every level from level 20 to level 24 had a gigantic gap before it. For many legendary mages, one such gap was sufficient to spend their life on. Which mage that had entered the legendary realm was not a person filled with talent? But how many of these people filled with talent had advanced past level 20 in their lives? Tutankhamun raised 3 fingers and said, 3 years. You'd better be prepared that you only have 3 years. Juresco estimated the next magic tide's arrival time, but he could not accurately pinpoint the year. There were too many anomalies, and thus he could not take everything into consideration. Hence, although it is said to be within 3 to 5 years, you need to prepare based on the shortest deadline possible so that no accidents will happen. To attain Sanctuary Realm within 3 years. This was something impossible no matter whom you asked. There was not a single person that dared to say that he'd reach Sanctuary Realm in 30 or even 300 years, not to mention 3 years. I'll try my best. Lin Li's face had a wry smile. Time was running out. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.